What's your worst story from the throw him in the pool, he'll learn how to swim parenting style? I had never gone camping before I was 11. I really wanted to go with my 10-year-old cousin. My parents took me to the woods and handed us the tent and a half-full bag of ranch Doritos and like a pack of bratwurst and my 7-year-old sister. Then they pulled off, leaving us to camp for the first time alone in the woods with a 7-year-old. It was not a fun weekend. I never went camping again, but it was apparently fine because that's how my dad and uncle learned. I'm just grateful for the lack of serial killers and black bears. My dad was notorious for the rub dirt on it method when I got hurt as a kid. When I was 9, I was in a nasty motorcycle accident out in the desert. I broke and misplaced my fibula. The bone was protruding from my leg. My dad didn't want to end his desert trip early, so he told me not to look at it and keep trying to walk. I was in so much pain anytime I'd move, I'd black out. My brother was so concerned he urged my dad that we should go home. My dad finally gave in but was so drunk he let my 11-year-old brother at the time drive us out of the desert. He was so nervous he hit so many bumps, and each bump I'd black out and then come to again. Once we got home, Dad thought it would be best to sleep it off before going to the hospital. The next day, I was admitted to the hospital and my dad was taken into custody by CPS. My dad, when he decided to give me driving lessons when I was a teenager, which turned out to be a driving lesson, singular. He took me to the parking lot across the street from our house and had me tool around to get used to the steering and pedals for about 15 minutes. Then, annoyed that I wasn't catching on fast enough for his taste, he decided we should go on the actual road and I'd learn faster in a more challenging environment. Cue him barking orders to speed up, slow down, hit the brakes, in an increasingly frustrated voice as I tooled along, terrified that I was going to hit someone. The culmination of our lesson came when he noticed we were low on gas and told me to pull into the gas station. Keep in mind, my sum total of driving experience at this point was about 25 minutes, which did not include parallel parking. I pulled into the gas station and came at the pump at something like a 30-degree angle. He grabbed the steering wheel to correct and actually yelled at me, "Jesus Christ, don't you know how to drive?" To which I said, "No, I don't. You're teaching me, remember?" He drove back home silently. That was the end of Dad's driving lessons. I signed up with a driving school after that. The narrator has done videos on helicopter parents before, and honestly I don't know which of these sets is worse. At least the helicopters can occasionally make the excuse of caring too much. Lots of these ones just come across as not wanting to parent. I should also warn you all that some of the following stories get pretty dark. Doing trauma surgery. A mum decided she needed a nap and told her 15-year-old daughter to drive. Mum survived, the daughter didn't. First and most painful organ harvest I ever did. Cliff jumping. 20 foot up, a girl's dad pushed her, but she hesitated and tried to stay up there but slipped. Landed on her back on a boulder from 15 feet and then the water. "You probably just killed her," I said, jumping in to do a rescue. Luckily, our lifeguard group was there doing practice rescues and even had the board. How she survived with just bruises is a miracle. Search and rescue pulled her out the rest of the way. Not my story, but my mum's. She developed a phobia after she was thrown into the pool as a kid to learn how to swim. At the age of 70, she still doesn't know how to. She's terrified of being on the water, even in a safety vest. Then some fake clairvoyant told her she'd die by drowning. So we spend our summers in the mountains as far away from water as possible. I was scared of the deep end, so my dad threw me in. My cousin parked an inflatable mattress in the corner I was in immediately. My parents supposedly yelled at him to move, but he didn't. I don't know how long I was under the mattress for, but I was spitting up water and choking when I came back up. I was maybe 6 at the time. I got stung by a bee and my mother was convinced I was faking. At the point I started to struggle to breathe, she finally irritatingly relented and made me walk to the hospital using my baby brother's stroller the entire way. When I got there, the staff were horrified, sometimes mortified apparently. They rushed me in to give me an epinephrine shot, and luckily that did the trick. Many months later, a bee got into my bedroom and my father called me a wimp for coming and getting him to deal with it instead of dealing with it myself. You have to learn to deal with these things sometime. Or I could just ask someone not allergic to bees to come and safely deal with the bee instead of risking hospitalization. And yes, I agree that my parents were terrible and negligent for more than just this one single incident. I've been no contact for about 20 years because of the way they treated me as a child. I have countless incidents like this from both of them. This one just stood out at the time I was replying. My younger cousin, who was 4, was a climber and always needed help getting down. His dad told his mum to leave him. He'll either learn how to get down himself or he'll stop climbing. My cousin ended up climbing onto a roof, falling off and getting impaled on a fence pole. One very expensive trip to ER, and he now has a cool scar on his thigh. I hurt my arm playing football during break at school. I was sent home by the school nurse. My dad said it was fine, bandaged it, and sent me to school the next day, only for them to send me home again within an hour. My mum made my dad take me to hospital and my arm was broken. My wrist had split lengthways and was in casts for 9 months. I was secretly buzzing, to be honest, because, well, that showed him, the idiot. My father-in-law decided that when his first child was born that he and his wife would not go to the baby when it started crying in the middle of the night in order to teach him that crying doesn't get you anything in this world. Turns out, newborns need to be fed every 2 hours, so it's a good thing my mother-in-law ignored him and went to their newborn son, otherwise he might have died. My parents gave me this advice and I shut that right down. They also wanted me to set the baby down and leave her to cry. She's undersized and gets pretty cold pretty quickly. And then they asked me when I'll let her stay with them overnight. Like, you aren't getting her at all with your outdated advice. Ignore them, she meant bullies. And don't show a reaction. When they're bored, they'll stop. This was completely false. And you wonder why I hate going to school so much, mother. It's not a wonder that when I went to secondary school, I made a motto of, don't stand for anyone's bullcrap. I went through too much of that crap for anyone else to do the same. Ironically enough, there are studies that state that the trauma of childhood bullying goes for the rest of one's life, so I'm pretty much set. When I got my very first period, then my family made a trip to the pool the next day. My mum shrugged it off and told me, "You don't bleed when you're swimming," and never said another word about it. I spent the entire time taking trips to the bathroom. I was volunteering at a parent-child zoo day and saw a few parents like this. The zoo had some free-roaming peacocks, and it was awful how many parents didn't tell their too-young-to-know kids that those things can be mean. So the little toddler goes, "Wow, pretty bird," and tries to get a closer look, only to get chased and attacked by this thing while the parents watch. Most of them said something like, "You should have known better." Like, how if you never teach them? The child can barely walk. You expect them to remember that some animals have a strong territorial sense? And then your baby gets terrorized by this thing that's bigger than them and looks alien for all they know, and you don't even give them a hug. See also that one mum that we had to kick out of the zoo because she was encouraging her kids to antagonize the llama in the hopes that it would spit on them. Yikes, people. Have some empathy for tiny humans who trust you implicitly with their well-being. When I was about 5 or 6, I was very sick with a flu. Fever, vomiting, sweating, congestion. It was awful. There was some mix-up at the pharmacy and they thought I was my father and gave him adult medication, basically these giant horse pills. Now, normal child medications for things like this are syrups and chewable stuff for obvious reasons. My dad came home and told me I had to take these meds. I had a hard time getting them down, almost choking a few times. He got frustrated and literally started shoving these huge pills down my sore throat with his angrily shaking fingers. I started crying. My nose was stuffed so I could only breathe through my mouth. I remember his wedding ring banging against my teeth, my eyes watering, gasping for air while looking at my mum for help. Eventually, I coughed it back up, crying and my throat on fire. I remember my mum demanding an apology from my dad who just said, "Well, he's gonna have to learn to take pills like that sometime anyway," and he stormed off. Damn, I haven't thought about that story in like 20 years. Well, honestly, I wonder how you haven't thought about it, because that's some childhood trauma stuff right there. If you're ever wondering whether you're doing the right thing for your kid, and part of your current situation involves you literally ramming a prescription that isn't for them into their throat, the answer is probably not. This is awful. My stepmom walked me, my sister and my brother, all between 10 and 12, deep into the woods and left us there to learn survival skills. We all thought we were out on a hike when she distracted us and ran away. We wandered into camp hours later. We knew how to get back, but searched for hours worried something had happened to her. She was drinking margaritas and smirking. My dad and I once witnessed someone who literally did this to a little 3-year-old girl. The little girl was just playing at the edge of the pool, happily minding her own business, when Dad ran up behind her, picked her up and tossed her, screaming, as far as he could into the deep end of the pool whilst yelling, "Time to swim, honey." At first, my dad and I didn't react, because my dad has done this to me as a game. I learned to swim first. But then we started to notice she was struggling to surface while her dad just watched. My dad nervously asked, "Can she swim?" To which the guy just shrugged and said, "She'll figure it out." I've never seen my dad book it so fast to get to the water as I did that day. He quickly got the kid out of the water and started screaming at the guy about what kind of idiot he was, while the girl was just bawling her eyes out. I swear my dad was ready to deck the guy. This was back in the 1990s, so we didn't have a cell phone to call the police with, and we never saw them again after that. It was the first time in my life I'd seen insane parenting, and to this day it freaks me out that some people will still do this. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. 2 days after I graduated high school, I came to an empty house. All of my stuff was in a U-Haul because my mum and stepdad moved without me. I've been financially independent ever since, but a heads up would have been real nice, guys. My real dad wasn't involved in this situation. He was on the other side of the country. I'm still close with him, but he's very low income, so he couldn't help me that time. I went no contact with my mum for about a year, but she weaseled her way back in. I think I see her in person every 2 years, and I don't acknowledge my stepfather exists. I've been considering going no contact with my mum again recently. I actually used to be a swim teacher in college teaching private lessons in people's backyards because of parents who'd thrown their kids into the pool to sink or swim. It was usually mums calling me for help because they heard from a friend of a friend that I was able to teach their kid and get them to like the water again in about a month or less. There was this one 7-year-old kid. I had to sit with him on the pool deck the whole first lesson and bring buckets of water to him, because his dad had dunked him multiple times and insisted that his son would just figure it out eventually because that's how he learned. Needless to say, he was never home when I was there. The mum had me come while dad was at work. 4 weeks later, she had me come later in the afternoon, so he'd come home towards the end of our lesson. His dad saw his son swimming and cried happy tears. He had no idea I'd been there 3 days a week for a month. My favorite student was a 70-year-old man who wanted to do a triathlon, but never learned to swim because his dad threw him as a child. It took about 3 months total, a lot of hand-holding on the steps and shallow end, but he finally achieved his goal and I got to cheer him on at the finish line. I still remember how each of my students clung to my arms and clawed at my neck in their first lessons. I never dunked or forced anyone out of their comfort zone. My lessons had to be customized for each student to keep it fun and relaxing. The trauma in their eyes was the haunting part. It stayed with me, and I never force anything on my kids that they aren't ready to do. It's about trust, not force. I am learning from these stories that some parents would rather not have a kid than a kid who has to learn things. My parents told me they were kicking me out at 18 in a move to motivate me. I was in college, no job and virtually no money. My grandfather had left me about $10,000 in savings bonds that I asked for, but they wouldn't give me either. So I made a plan. I went to about 5 different Targets and shoplifted about 4 or 5 video games that I took to GameStop to sell. Stupid and wrong, I know. And at the end of the day, I had about $600. I was planning on buying some green herb to sell to get some income going till I got on my feet. But when I got back to my house, a cop was waiting for me. My parents ended up cashing in my $10,000 to pay for the lawyer. I was always a picky eater growing up. One time my mum sat me down with a small bowl of almonds and told me I couldn't get out of my seat until I finished it. I insisted that I hated them and they were making my mouth itch. She thought I was just being difficult. I started to swallow the almonds like pills because my mouth was so itchy from chewing them. A couple of years later, I saw an allergist and discovered that I was in fact allergic to tree nuts. My mum's whole parenting style was sink or swim, but funnily enough, she did literally toss me into the pool as well. The summer between 1st and 2nd grade, my family moved somewhere with a pool. My mum was adamant that I had to learn to swim as a baby, so she bought floaties for my younger sister and refused to buy any for me because I already knew how to swim and you're too big for floaties. When I refused to get into any part of the pool I couldn't walk in, my mum called to me from outside the pool and promptly grabbed me and tossed me into the 6-foot end. And surprise, I didn't know how to swim. I remember splashing twice, hearing my mum yell at me to stop panicking, and then I went under and tried swimming to the surface like I'd seen in movies, and eventually got my head a bit above water, coughed out a bunch of water, and started screaming for help before I went under again. My mum told me to stop making a scene and swim towards the edge. I made it to the edge and couldn't pull myself out of the pool, so she yelled at me to swim to the shallow end. When I tried to grab onto the edge to just pull myself to the shallow end, she kept taking my fingers off the edge and yelling at me to stop playing and just swim. When I finally got to the shallow part, my mum and family just went, "See, you still remember how to swim? You never forget." They threw me in the pool, I drowned, and needed CPR. They let me use my floaties after that. "Stop crying or I'll give you a reason to cry," is something my dad used to say to me. It would send me into a panic. I was upset and didn't know how to stop crying, and then hearing that would make it worse because now I'm crying because my dad was mad at me, and if I didn't stop crying, he was going to make me cry even more. My dad actually did throw me in the pool to see if I could swim. They didn't want to teach me to tie my shoes because my mom said, "I had to learn that myself, so should you." My in-laws were like this with their kids. So when my husband and I started dating, I got to teach him how to eat without grasping his silverware like a toddler, showed him an easier way to tie his shoes, taught him better hygiene, stuff like that. He was able to do everything on his own, but it was very clear that he'd had to figure it out on his own and no one had bothered to teach him or help him at any point. Just in case anyone wanted an example of how adults who are metaphorically thrown in the pool actually end up further down the line. Also, I used the term throw in the pool to describe those who think kids can magically self-teach themselves everything, but my god, there are so many who do it literally. That ain't right. At age 4, my father decided that my sister and I should learn to tie our shoes. He made us stand there for hours, trying to do it, crying. We just weren't quite old enough. Every time I asked my parents to explain anything as a kid, I was told either, "You're smart, you'll figure it out," or "You just don't want to do it." Any attempt at maturity was met with either flat-out laughter or being told that I was too young to worry about it. Cue me turning 18 and suddenly I'm expected to be an adult, get a job, pay taxes and all that jazz. I asked where in the heck do I start and they got angry because apparently I hadn't figured anything out. Wonder why, guys? I was at the beach one time and it was hot out. I couldn't walk on the sand without sandals on. I heard a cry and looked up to see a little girl standing barefoot on the sand, not more than 2, screaming for her dad, who was 5 feet away, who just told her to stop being such a little wimp. I just about had a rage stroke and ran over to pick her up myself, but he eventually did. When I was 11 or 12, 2 kids from the neighborhood got into a street fight. Kid 1 clearly got the best of Kid 2, and 2 was crying and went home. That should have been the end of the story. Kid 2's parents met him at his front door and sent him back out there to continue the fight. I'm not sure if it was about honor or what, but it was painful to watch. My mum forced me to drink milk. She just thought I hated healthy stuff and only preferred junk food. The thing is, I always loved veggies, but I also like junk food. Basically, I like any food except milk. I just couldn't consume milk. It would make me chuck up, and then I'd have sudden acid reflux, not being able to handle it. She thought I was acting to escape, but I just hated it. Turns out I was lactose intolerant and my mum still thinks I'm making it up because she can't let go of her ego. "Oh, let him touch the fire. He won't do it again. 3rd degree burns for life. Thanks, Dad." 7 years old. Had an asthma attack at our camp in the middle of the night. At the time, treatment for an attack was a nebulizer machine that required electricity, which we didn't have at our camp. My parents kept telling me that I just had to calm down and breathe better so the attack would go away on its own. They only intervened hours later because they couldn't sleep because of all the noise I was making as I choked and gasped for air. We drove 3 hours back to our house, passing multiple hospitals along the way, because they were embarrassed that I was in such bad shape and blamed me for just not breathing properly. Fun times! I still have asthma, but it's been well managed for years now. I take Zenhale every day and Ventolin as needed. I've been no contact with my mother for over a decade. I'm still in contact with my father. They divorced in my early 20s. We aren't close, but I still find enough value in the relationship to keep talking to him. He isn't actively cruel like my mother was, just lost in his own world, I guess you could say. I feel sorry for him that he hasn't managed to overcome his own demons the way that I have. Overall, I'm happy and healthy now. I have a lovely husband and we've created a good life for ourselves. I do have CPTSD from the years of mistreatment I've lived through, but therapy and proper medication have helped tremendously. The actual pool thing. I was a lifeguard as a high schooler. Some parents did this to their 5-year-old. The parent thought the kid was fine because he wasn't splashing around. He was bobbing up and down with his arms going straight up and straight out. That actually means they're drowning. I had to jump in and grab the kid, who had swallowed significant amounts of water, then call an ambulance to check the kid out. Parents didn't want us to call the ambulance, but we told him it was the ambulance or the police, because what he did could be considered child endangerment. Dad was losing his crap, screaming at me, a 17-year-old girl. The owner of the pool saw this, and he, a former Navy dude, got up in the dad's face. The parent was banned from the pool for life. To this day, I'm convinced the guy was completely hammered.
What's the worst thing that's happened at your family gathering? Grandma died sitting on the couch while we all thought she was sleeping. So we went on with dinner. We all ate, drank, and were merry until the wee hours of the morning when somebody tried to wake her up. Nobody knew what to think about the fact we partied next to Grandma's corpse for like 6 hours. Oh, I think I'd feel awful. Like maybe with time, that would heal it a bit, maybe be a little bit funny to some degree, but that's still kind of grim. This didn't happen to me, but I watched it happen and it was awful. My cousin was pregnant from a guy who she had only been dating for a few months, but he was a good guy. On Christmas Eve, she invited him to our family gathering, and when we were exchanging presents, he grabbed a small box from the tree and was 2 seconds from getting down on one knee when that uncle jokingly says, "God, I hope you're not proposing." Everyone laughs and this guy is in a half-bent knee, half-standing pose and just looks up at that uncle and slowly powers through it and slowly gets down on one knee and proceeds to ask her if she'll marry him. She said yes, and they're engaged, but it was one of the worst 45 seconds of my life. Whoa, 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 whoa. That's the worst 45 seconds of his life. You don't get to claim that. And honestly, good for that guy for being able to power through it. I don't exactly agree with people getting married after a few months, but they do them. Thanksgiving about 1985, family gathering at my parents' home. Mom, dad, brother, sister, grandmas, aunts, uncles, cousins, etc., all watching football. Cousin picks up the remote to mess with the volume but turns on the VCR on accident. Full-blown smut fills the screen. Dad leaps, grabs the remote and fumbles frantically to turn it off. Bible thumper brother and sister-in-law snatch up their kids and leave. Cousin says, "Boy, that sudden death can really get intense." My stepmom never got along with her sister-in-law, brother's wife. They got into a fist fight one Thanksgiving at my grandparents' house. Grandma got mad and called the police. My dad was a police officer at the time. Guess who showed up to arrest his wife and sister-in-law? I mean, if I were a policeman and one of my relatives' addresses came up on the dispatch radio or whatever, I'd also be like, nope, this is on me. I'm taking care of it. Great-grandma's funeral in Arkansas. I have some distant third cousin named Stormy. Again, this is in Arkansas. And we're all gathered around the grave, and as the preacher starts to lead us in prayer, you hear this awful noise. Everyone turns to look, and there is Stormy, swinging an armadillo around his head by the tail. One of my other cousins got him to put the armadillo down so we could finish the service, but I don't recall ever having seen him at another family gathering since then. Yes, Stormy is male. He was about 19 at the time. Yes, the armadillo was alive. Apparently it had a nest or was taking a nap. I don't know what armadillos do in their spare time. Under a nearby bush, sounded kind of like a cat rejecting the advances of an unwanted lover. To quote Hank Hill, that boy ain't right. My grandmother tried to self-delete herself in the front yard because my mother wouldn't let me and my siblings, 6, 4, and 2, ride sitting on the back hood of my uncle's classic convertible during their neighborhood 4th of July parade. She was angry that no one would be able to see our outfits if we were seated inside the car, and while trying to delete herself, accidentally grazed my grandpa in the process. Good times. That is certainly what I would call an unnecessary escalation. Oh, I have one. This happened like a week ago at a little get-together of my family at my house. My brother-in-law and his wife got into a huge argument about their new baby's medical care. The little one had a terrible case of psoriasis, and he blamed his wife for not staying on top of it, causing it to bleed. During this shouting match, Bill declared that if he was going to be raising some other man's baby, he was going to be calling the goddamn shots from then on. They have been married for 10 years and have 2 other girls. We were all so mortified we left my house. 10 other people got into cars and went to the park. This was my husband's brother and his wife, by the way. Man literally said, "I'm not the stepfather, I'm the father that stepped up, and I'm gonna be..." And I don't think many men would openly declare, "This child ain't mine, but by God, I'm gonna do this right." Proposed to my girlfriend at my birthday party and she said no, then told me she had been cheating on me. This was post-cake. They always stick around for cake, mate. During Christmas, with the family, we discovered the hard way that my little sister, who was 3 years old, was prone to cerebral seizures. Everyone was freaking out while my little sister was blue and foaming at the mouth. Aunts, uncles, and dads start arguing over my grandfather's possessions after his passing in his house after his funeral. Lots of yelling, pushing, get the F outs that day. Eventually pulled my dad out of the house in an effort to save the family. They never recovered. My uncle passed away without ever speaking with my my dad again, and the others speak a bit to each other, but we haven't had any family events. It's been 3 years. Christmas at my auntie's house with my whole extended family on my dad's side, and their pets. In particular, these 2 dogs, one of which was very fond of the other, and this dog decided he wanted to have his way with the smaller, uninterested dog. Long story short, the large dog busted a nut all over the kitchen floor, leaving a huge mess that we had to clean up before eating our dinner. That is a bad dog. That is a very, very bad dog. Thanksgiving back in 1998. I was 8 years old and my wealthy grandparents decided to take the whole family to Maui for the week. This included our 5-person family and around 15 extended family members. All was great until Thanksgiving dinner. My older cousins started bickering, which turned into a pretty big altercation and some food throwing. 8-year-old me is loving it until the uncles get involved. My 18-year-old male cousin, who was a total buttwipe, starts freaking out at my 15-year-old female cousin, calling her a harlot for reasons unbeknownst to me. At this point, female cousin's dad comes flying over and punches his nephew so hard that he is literally thrown a few feet and is nearly knocked out. Now, the other uncle has to defend his son, which results in a few punches between those two until my family can separate them. There will never be a better Thanksgiving dinner, and my grandparents will never take us anywhere again. We gathered at my grandma's house where my mom and all her sisters had been raised. My oldest aunt had done a bunch of dodgy stuff to glom all the estate, and the sisters had come in full force with their husbands and kids to try and talk sense into her. It did not work. They should have lawyered up, but this was the 60s. Hell, I don't know why they were all so weak. All of us cousins had been kicked out while the grown-ups argued. I was just a little kid, and I went to get a glass of water. She had put locks on the cupboards. Mean aunt came in and slapped me across the face so hard I was staggered. I did not get water. One of my older cousins found me crying and took me to town, riding on his shoulders part of the way to buy me a soda at the drugstore and a few toys. Many years later, my mom told me mean aunt most likely poisoned grandma, and it seems true. What you have there, my friend, is a classic Disney evil aunt. I'm picturing the lady from the goddamn Rescuers, you know, the one with the red hair and the crocodiles. That's the kind of lady that sounds like. My mother-in-law's boyfriend randomly out of nowhere just says, "In case anyone was wondering, I'm against gay marriage." My mother-in-law, to her credit, looks at him and just said, "Did anyone ask?" It was an awkward couple of minutes. My alcoholic uncle got so drunk at his own daughter's wedding that he urinated on the wedding cake in front of half the wedding party. He quit drinking after that. Relatives showing off their weird-looking baby and people trying not to say anything awful about it. Being one of the first to greet them and thus having no warning, all I could come up with was, "Oh, that's a baby." I guess no blood was spilled, but I felt like dirt afterwards. I once, without thinking, just openly said that I thought it was weird that people hang up pictures of ultrasounds in front of my friend who was doing just that, and I got a lot of words thrown at me. Luckily, I missed this Christmas cause me and my mom and dad were at Disneyland. My great-grandma had a dog. Can't recall what it was, but it was super small since before I was born. Well, one Christmas, everyone is eating in the kitchen with a clear view of the dog in the backyard. In the middle of Christmas dinner, a big Doberman comes into the backyard and rips the little dog's throat out. Kind of ruined Christmas. Kind of ruined Christmas? I think that's the understatement of the century. My grandmother threw her prosthetic breast at me. I was watching the American football game during Thanksgiving while my relatives, mostly female, were sitting at the table within view of the living room. Suddenly I hear, "Hey, name," and as I turned and look in that direction, this blob comes at me and I reactively catch it. They start laughing and I realize that I'm holding my grandma's prosthetic pillow. Never has a breast been rejected by my hands so quickly. We had a huge family dinner at a very fancy restaurant. My great-aunt decided to move a very fancy pot of flowers with some peacock feathers stuck in it out of the way. In this case, out of the way meant right above the candles. It turns out the peacock feathers burn incredibly fast and produces a lot of smoke. The whole restaurant had to be evacuated. To be honest, it wasn't really that bad. The dinner had been incredibly boring. 14-year-old me certainly thought the fire made things a lot more interesting. This one day we woke up in a relative's house after a gathering night. We found the morning water tasted weird, so my cousin and host checked the water tank. The rat was floating there. Everyone in his house headed to the hospital instantly. I'd be doing the same thing. Well, we have a family reunion annually in Virginia for some distant relatives on my mom's side. No one in my immediate family has attended until about 7 years ago when my mother started driving my grandma to the reunion. Dad says that we could make it a family trip, but Mom brushed the idea off. My parents divorced 5 years ago, and the next year my mom somehow cons me into attending the reunion with her and her new boyfriend. Everyone at the reunion already knew her boyfriend. Turns out she had been taking him up to our family reunion for the last few years with my grandma. I'm starting to believe my grandma never cared for my dad all that much. My grandma was staying over with us at my parents' house on Christmas Eve. The evening went great and everyone was happy. Right as everyone's going to bed, my grandma starts throwing up in her bed, saying she feels horrible, but she doesn't want us to call an ambulance because she doesn't want to trouble anyone on Christmas Eve. She's like the epitome of a sweet old lady. My parents call an ambulance anyway, and good thing because it turns out she was having a heart attack. She lived, ended up having a quadruple bypass, followed by a full recovery, our Christmas miracle. She's still alive and kicking and still smart as a whip. I miss my grandmother. Introduced to a distant cousin for the first time who was a 10. She was beautiful, and I was told that she was deaf. I had never met a deaf person. We were both 15 years old. I shook her hand and said to my brother who was standing next to me, "She's a babe." She started to laugh. "I read lips," she said. Singing Sweet Home Alabama all summer long. We're celebrating an uncle's birthday and we realized about 15 minutes into it that Grandma died. Everyone lost their mind because she was 75 and seemed fine 10 minutes before. Died of a massive brain aneurysm. Whole family was devastated and I still took some cake. This happened just a couple of months ago. My wife is pregnant and we were a few months in. We had gone to the doctor to find out the gender and we were throwing a family party to deliver the news. Her family is very well off and very large. I'm talking 50 people within a 5-block radius to her grandparents' house. My side of the family is super small. Just my mom, stepfather, and aunt come to the party. So I supplemented my side with some of our mutual couple friends. About an hour into the party, we had everyone go outside for the reveal. We prepared these poppers filled with confetti, either blue for male or pink for female, for the announcement. I thought it would be hilarious to make one filled with the opposite color, but my wife said no. Anyways, everyone gets a popper, lines up on either side of the driveway. 3, 2, 1. Pop! Pink glitter and confetti fly in the air. Everyone is hooting and hollering in celebration. We start receiving congratulatory remarks from my friends and her family. I made the announcement that we had come up with a name. Right after I said the name, my mother comes up to me and says, "Are you sure it's not a boy?" "Yes, I'm very sure. The doctor confirmed it last weekend." A tear starts to roll down her cheek. "And y'all are firm on the name? We really like the name we picked out. What about my middle name, Jean?" "I'll get my wife, but I think we're pretty set on the name we picked out." She left shortly after that exchange without saying goodbye. Apparently, right after the pop, she turned to my friend who had just gotten her PhD and asked how reliable those sonograms are at determining the gender of the child. She gave us the cold shoulder for the next 3 months and has a collection of boy names ready just in case 3 doctors and a handful of nurses are wrong about us having a baby girl in December. Some people just utterly hate being wrong. Christmas dinner. Grandpa picked up something at the store that wasn't what Grandma asked for. Grandma threw frozen chicken at Grandpa's head. Grandpa ducked, chicken hit glass patio door, shattering it. Police were called, children were quickly taken and driven home, and Grandma wonders why most of the family doesn't make much of an effort to stay in touch. My brother throwing a temper tantrum at age 30. It has been pretty common for him to blow up about little crap all his life. It was his youngest daughter's 2nd birthday, and he was in a really bad mood all day, even though our mum and his wife had taken care of everything. It came to a head when it was about time to do the cake. It was kind of a tall cake with a carousel on top. The dog bumped into the table and the cake shifted a little, almost knocking the carousel over. He stood up and said something like, "God damn it, your frickin' dog is ruining everything." My mom said, "Calm down, the cake is fine." He got in her face and said, "Don't tell me what to do, B-word." At that point, my brother and stepdad got up and kind of surrounded him, ready to kick his butt. After a few seconds, he finally stormed out of the house and left. I feel the need to reiterate at this point that he was 30 years old and it was his daughter's 2nd birthday. Now, I'm hardly one to make excuses for anyone's bad behavior, but it sounds like he has some undiagnosed anger issues. About 12 years ago, we were all at my uncle's house. Me, my siblings, parents, grandparents, and obviously my aunt and uncle. Grandpa was drinking some coffee with dessert when it went down the wrong pipe, and he choked up a bit. My mom, being one of the biggest overreactors I've ever known, assumes he's having another heart attack. He has a history of heart trouble, and flips the heck out. When my aunt tried to intervene and say that he wasn't having a heart attack and only coughing because of the coffee, they got into a screaming and shoving fight. Eventually, my uncle just goes, "Get the hell out of my house, get the hell out right now." 10 minutes later, we're all in a car and out of there. Up until last year, they cut off all contact with my aunt and uncle, and fairly recently, they've talked to them, added them on Facebook, invited them to events, etc. Our worst family story happened at my aunt's wedding. My aunt, a white lady, was marrying a Korean-American man whose parents really wanted him to marry a Korean woman. During their entire engagement, his parents would invite random Korean women over for dinner to try and sway him. Eventually, they seemed to get over the fact that he was definitely going to be marrying a white girl. On the wedding day, his parents seemed politely resigned to the situation. His father actually even danced with my aunt at the reception, so we were all relieved. After dancing, his father approached the mic, and we all expected him to give a toast about how my aunt was so great that he overcame his prejudice or something. Instead, he said in his thick Korean accent, "This is abomination, like German shepherd mating with poodle." My aunt ran out of the room crying, and my grandfather casually walked up and punched him in the face in front of 200 wedding guests. People cheered. I know this dude was Korean, and Khan Susanusamphone is Laotian, but I can totally imagine that happening if Bobby and Khan Jr. from King of the Hill got married. Well, it was a series of events, but it all came to a head at my grandfather's funeral. However, I'll attempt to make this as short as possible. So, a number of years back, my grandfather had a stroke. No one knew it was a stroke till 2 or 3 years later while he was refurbishing his 32 Chevy, which he treated better than his family. Eventually, he started to deteriorate and can no longer care for himself, and my grandmother can no longer do it by herself. In comes my brother, who closes down the business he just opened in order to be his full-time caregiver. I helped him as much as I could, but I lived 4 hours away at the time finishing up college. Occasionally, his brother and sister would come to visit, but for no more than 20 minutes before they had to scurry out the door for important business, all the while telling him how much they loved him. Eventually, he passed away in a peaceful manner, surrounded by my family. I'm still away at this point, and reconciles with them for all the crap he had to put them through. In comes his siblings, who, once again, shriek like banshees while mourning his death as if they had done everything to care for him. They did not. However, my grandfather said I took care of him more often than they did, and I was a full-time student who lived 4 hours away. Then comes the wake, or open casket viewing for those who may not know, where his family puts on a show for everyone to show their love in a public setting. Eventually, things slow down, and my grandmother thinks it would be nice to share our fond memories of him with those who have gathered to show their support, which we do. However, when my grandmother gets up to speak, they begin to chatter amongst themselves and abruptly leave in the middle of her speech. This was the last straw for my father, who confronted them and told them they would no longer be able to carry his casket to lay him to rest. The following day at the funeral, things went eerily smooth, although they did the whole banshee wails again for attention, but other than that, it was peaceful. Then comes the final goodbyes before we lay him down to rest. All of the sisters thought it would be great to write a joint letter to my brother and grandmother, who took care of him in his final days, and speak their minds. The gist of the letter was that they killed him, neglected him, and ignored him, which led to his death. Also included was a jab at my nephew, who was 2 at the time, stating that if my brother cared for his son like he cared for my grandfather, he would have another tinier casket to deal with in the near future. They ended the letter telling us to repent for our sins and to ask God for forgiveness unless we wish to burn in hell. We don't speak much anymore with that side of the family. Inheritance really seems to bring out the worst in families at times. Like, one time at band camp, I'm kidding, one time I went on a date with this woman who had recently inherited a fairly large property that she had plans for from her father, who left it in their name. I'm not going to name names here. And their family, all the way from like the Yemen or something, came down to England to try and like get something out of her, even though they weren't named in the will or anything like that. They had nothing to do with them for years or anything. And basically they put her through hell and in trying to like gain the property entirely for themselves, even to the point of threatening her. I was 10 and there was a family gathering at my aunt's house with a bunch of people staying over at her house. Get called into the family room and all my aunts are there looking at me. They start questioning me about my grandma's clock and whether I was playing with it, which I did, so I said yes. Turns ugly real quick, and it's an all-out argument between my mom defending me and my aunts accusing me of breaking my grandma's $5 clock. They keep grilling me about whether I broke the clock, although it wasn't broken, the batteries just fell out. Fight drags out into the night. The hosting aunt brings out other instances of how I wasn't behaving, like running my fingers through her carpet and drawing on her carpet with my finger, eventually accuses my dad of purposely breaking her sleeping bags. Me, being 10 and not understanding what this fight is actually about, feels guilty that maybe I caused this whole thing because I played with my grandma grandma's clock, and my poor mom is defending me when I might have broken my grandma's clock by playing with it. The hosting aunt eventually apologizes to my mother months later, but it made things really awkward for 10 years. Even now, things aren't really the same. Years after the whole thing, I realized it wasn't even really about me or the clock. It was about some other crap that I don't really even understand, but my aunts used me as their point of attack. I even remember me saying all of this over a clock when I was 10 during the fight, and one of my aunts insisting it was more than that, implying that it was about how I was a horrible liar or something. You can't make this stuff up. My older brother died in his sleep when he was 16, shortly before Christmas in 2005. During his funeral, my grandfather, Mom's dad, got up to speak right after my sobbing dad and said, "I'm the grandfather. I just wanted y'all to know that," and sat down. Everyone either looked confused or extremely angry. The reason why this was extra crappy was because we had never seen him until then. My mom had spoken about him in a very negative way over the years and told us he had left her and her siblings when they were young. He worked as a pimp and a substance dealer, and he had recently gotten a 25-year-old pregnant. A few months after my brother's funeral, my mom told me my uncle had been born. One of my best friends attended the funeral, and he still likes to joke about my grandfather. 2 days later, my girlfriend of 2 years cheated on me at a New Year's Eve party. I went to a family reunion in the holler of Kentucky with folks I thought I knew. It was my cousin's or great-uncle's house. I'm not too sure, and he is 80-plus years old and his family has owned this land forever. Everyone, except for my immediate family, was very close to them. So some 12-year-old girl in my family who was white brings over a black girl. Everything was fine and dandy till one of the owners saw this. He yelled at the top of his lungs, "What the F is this crap?" Insert hick name here. "Didn't build this land to have an, oh geez, on it. It ain't right." That little girl will never forget that. She had to deal with real racism right in her face, and I was so embarrassed for being a part of that family and felt that I had to apologize for being associated. We left very quickly after.
Skyscraper window cleaners. What is the most bizarre thing you've ever seen on the job? Once, while cleaning a high-rise apartment, an old lady kindly asked me if I was hungry and proceeded to open her window and hand me a pizza slice. So I sat there 27 stories up, tangling on my chair and eating pizza. It was a good day. Not as exciting as the other stories, but something I'm blown away by when I'm on ropes is how many people feel guilty about not working when I'm around. When you look into people's workstations, you can see that almost no one works. Most people are on Facebook, YouTube, or on news sites. But the second they notice me outside of the window, they quickly switch to an Excel spreadsheet. Like they think I'm some kind of productivity spy about to rat them out to management. Keep cruising the internet, people, don't mind me. And also, pointing to the window and saying, "You missed a spot," isn't funny. F you. I've been a rope access window cleaner for a couple of years and have seen my fair share of weirdness. A couple incidences that strike out are a young couple having fun that invited me to join, an apartment in a ritzy building completely empty other than a table with several sheets of freshly printed uncut $100 bills, a real goddamn mummy sarcophagus. Been offered several doobies, hits, and various adult beverages while hanging off the side of a building. Animals were always my favorite though. Cats and puppies lose their minds seeing you outside their window and will happily chase your mop and squeegee while you work. Always brighten the day. Another memorable moment was causing a mild panic in the dining room of a local retirement home dementia ward. We felt bad and went as quickly as we could, but the nurses laughing their butts off as they tried to contain the pandemonium made us feel slightly better. Not a skyscraper window washer, but was a janitor who had to wash the windows in a 6-story building as part of my job. So I used a mix of ladders and rappelling down from the roof with a harness to clean the windows outside. One day I was washing the outside windows on the executive floor where all the bosses and higher-up employees had their offices. I was done with one window, so I moved to the next window and looked in and saw the CEO of the company snorting something in his office with the door locked and the lights off. He looked up and saw me in the window, and we made an uncomfortable eye contact for about 15 seconds. Then I just pretended I saw nothing and kept washing the windows. Never spoke a word about it to him or anyone in the office, but the last day I worked there, he gave me a farewell card with $200 in it and a free solar-powered portable phone charger that the company produced and sold. Hey, is this Riley Freeman in the future? Because this guy said no snitching. One time in college, I answered a help wanted ad for a window cleaner. I thought it was going to be one of those high-rise jobs. Instead, when I showed up to the interview, it was some disheveled-looking guy in a parking lot. I spent the day with him going from house to house, cleaning people's windows. He told me to pretend I was his nephew, and he kept introducing me to customers that way. Then, when we're cleaning windows, he kept telling me his fantasies of getting with housewives. It was super weird. Plus, he chewed tobacco and while driving would spit the juice between his legs onto the floor of his ratty truck. Then, at the end of the day, he told me it was just an audition and tried not to pay me. One of the strangest days of my life. I am a window cleaner, but not high-rise. The thing I can never understand is when I see lip prints where people have kissed the glass in public buildings. People, if you saw what I clean off of those every week, you would never touch the glass, especially not with your lips. Since a lot of people are asking when the glass is super dirty, it's usually grease, old condiments, bird poop, salt from the sidewalk, and a lot of the time I can't even tell what it is. I just know it looks and smells bad. My uncle is a former window cleaner, and he said his most memorable moments were when he lived and worked in Rotorua, which at the time was the crime capital of New Zealand. The most bizarre was when he saw some naked guy, obviously high on something, getting Benny Hill chased up and down a street by the police. The second most bizarre was when he heard a crash followed by a van tire bouncing down the street that was being chased by a massive Maori guy, who proceeded to throw the tire over his shoulder and wander off whistling as if nothing had happened. Not me, but my uncle has been doing it for years and had many weird encounters, but this one is kinda sad. Having changed companies, he started at this new apartment building. Near the top, there was this old lady with a dog. The dog was young and always excited to see him. Eventually, he started talking to this woman when he was working through a small window. They became somewhat friends. Then one day, almost a year on the job, he went up and for the first time, the apartment was empty except for the dog, which he found odd. So when he was finished up, he tried to check and see if she was in, but got no reply. A day later, a member of staff from the apartment block, I think it was the landlord but can't remember, got back to him and told him that she passed away and that she had no family. Assuming that my uncle knew her, the landlord asked about the dog, seeing if there was anything that could be done. My uncle, being the kind fella he was, took the dog. Nearly 10 years later, my uncle still has the dog, a little terrier named Pumpkin. A lot of y'all are going to be really jealous, but there's an attached image of Pumpkin and he's really cute. Well, I was watching the outside of the window at the group home I work at. State was coming by later that week and I was super bored. I walk up to one of my dude's bedroom windows to wash it off and apparently he hears me outside somehow, even though he had his radio turned up to about 9,000 like he always does. He rips up his blinds, totes naked and starts slapping himself repeatedly in the forehead and screaming. This was pretty normal for him, but it's definitely the strangest thing I've ever seen so far in my life while washing a window. What I got was a lot of flirting. I don't know if the pane of glass gave them a sense of safety or if a lot of office chicks are just bored or if our red overalls were particularly fetching, but something brought out the bachelorette instinct. Notes pressed against the glass, pretend lesbian performances, you name it. Only seemed to happen when there was a group of ladies though. My grandfather met my grandma while working as a window washer. He put his phone number right up against the glass of her office and hoped she wrote it down. She did, and called, and they've been married for 60 years. That is quite sweet. I wasn't expecting a story like that in here. My ex was a high-rise window cleaner and he always talked about the crazy things women did. It seems like the glass gives them a sense of security and they do things that I don't think they'd do if that glass wasn't there. Women flashing and pressing their chest against the glass, mooning and pressing their butt cheeks on the glass, writing their phone number and pressing it against the glass. There was one point where we were engaged and he would hold his finger up and point to his ring. It didn't seem to stop some of the women. In fact, it made some of them try harder, he said. He did say the hardest for him were the children's hospitals and when he'd clean the windows of the very sick children. This company did do the dress up as superheroes thing while they cleaned the windows, which made it fun for the kids, but he said it was still heartbreaking for them. I was in King's Cross in Sydney about 15 years ago when I finished my drop and landed on a lower roof. I witnessed a working girl giving a guy in a wheelchair service. He looked at me and gave me a thumbs up, nearly fell over laughing. Window cleaner here. I have a few stories of cleaning high-rises that still make me chuckle. 1. My coworker, who no longer works there, always used to crap his pants, like had an issue, but never took care of it medically. I don't know, but it was always a joke. One day after lunch, we were strapping up to go over the site, and he turns to me and says, "Dude, how quickly do you think we can get this drop done?" Me, it's only a 7 story, so maybe 30 minutes or so? Why? Him, Alright, let's go. It was a goofy edge, so sometimes we would hand each other our buckets of water. The second I handed him his water, he screams into my face, "God damn it!" What I witnessed next was probably the quickest descent I've ever seen, as he's cursing the entire way down the rope. Absolute hilarity for clarification. Yes, he indeed crapped himself. Another story. Different co-worker, there were 3 of us that dropped next to each other. One of them loved screwing with people on the inside. This was a dorm about 25 stories or so. Near halfway down the building, you can really start swinging, and he yells at me and the other guy to swing over to him. On his drop was a college girl passed out on the windowsill. Him, on the count of 3, slam your suction cups on the glass and scream. We proceeded to scare the living crap out of this poor girl. She fell off the sill almost immediately. It ended with everyone laughing. She took a selfie with us, and she later met us at the bottom of the building and punched all of us playfully. She had a good spirit about it. I was once cleaning a skyscraper where I know nearly everyone that works there. I saw a job interviewer having gay sex with another guy, probably someone he interviewed. The interviewer, who is straight, married, and has kids, gave me $500 not to tell anyone. Easiest money I ever made. He didn't snitch. Riley Freeman would be proud. My uncle has been doing this job for over 20 years, so I've heard a few weird stories from him. 1. A woman filming smut. 2. A sign on a window asking them not to clean the bathroom window. Obviously, not knowing which window was to what room, they went about their jobs. The bathroom had skinned rabbits hung up. 3. A hoarder whose windows were slowly being hidden by the years of collections. 4. A famous footballer who was not with his wife. Not long after this, the company were asked to sign NDAs. 5. What looked like a murder scene. Uncle reported it, but was later told it was fake blood for a TV show that was filming there. His favorite, number 6, a dog breeder. Okay, breeder might not be the right word. Someone who had 2 litters, and every 4 weeks he went back to clean the building and got to see the pups growing up. When he went back there, and they were roughly 12 weeks, there was 1 pup left. He asked for her, and now he's got a Rottie called Holly. There was a point where I was thinking to myself, I bet this is just going to be repeatedly, I saw 2 people getting it on, but you know what, that's actually been pretty scarce. I don't clean windows, but I work from scaffolding and do rope access work on high-rises and skyscrapers in New York City all the time. It's not that often I see something bizarre, and I'll see into hundreds of apartments a year, so I honestly feel many of the posts in here are made up. Sure, you occasionally see the caught-off-guard tenant, but if you do see someone, they usually just wave and shut their curtains/blinds. The most bizarre thing I've seen, though, has to be when I found a section of loose brick about 15 stories up. I removed them to put them in my satchel as usual and found dozens of used condoms shoved behind the brick. Like, how the hell? I still have no idea to this day. I think our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man has been doing some freaky stuff with Mary Jane, and he's hiding his used condoms behind that brick like squirrels storing their nuts for winter. Dropped in on a dude throwing kitchen knives at a dartboard and an undersized pink robe. Skipped that window. I work for my dad's window cleaning business in Scotland, and while cleaning a couple windows, ground floor bungalows, I stumbled across the couple having sex in the living room window. They made eye contact with me and didn't stop. Probably the most awkward experience of my life, but you better believe I finished the job and took my £20 tip. Maybe you haven't thought about this that much, but I'm pretty sure they used you as an accessory, mate. We don't do high-rises, but I've seen my fair share of nudity. One dude was doing calisthenics buck naked in front of his window overlooking the lake. Another trip to the same house and his wife dropped her robe and took a bath, knowing full well we were there. I think these people overestimate how strong their tint is. Favorite story involves 2 new guys on a roof washing some skylights. I'm on the ground having a chat with the homeowner when I get a text that says, "We can see someone in the shower. Great chest." I thought, weird, I'm talking to the wife right now. Who are they looking at? A few minutes later, and her heavy-set husband comes outside with wet hair. There's also the time I took a dump in the backyard of an NHL player's house, but that's a bit off topic. When I used to work as a window cleaner for a building in West Hollywood, I would often see lots of famous people in the building. Not mega famous people, but kind of well-known actors and such. One day I was just cleaning the window as normal. This particular window had the blinds down while I was cleaning. One side of the blinds broke down and I saw a celebrity licking his dog's junk. I can't erase that image. It wasn't a high-rise, but I used to be a residential window washer, and sometimes clients would want the inside cleaned in addition to the outside. First worst was a morbidly obese man who was living at home, I believe on hospice care, but definitely at least with a full-time nurse. The man chain-smoked inside his house non-stop. When we cleaned the inside, the water was yellow coming off the glass. Second was the home of the city's university president. Absolutely disgusting. We would find old dog crap lying around, walked into their kitchen, dishes were everywhere, and a frying pan had a couple of photos soaking in some kind of oil grease. That just sounds like an absolute pigsty. Does anyone remember that show, How Clean Is Your House? Ex-repelling window cleaner here saw a co-worker mix up his main line with his safety line. The harness was rated for the thicker rope and he never engaged. He fell 5 stories before bouncing off an entryway overhang made of concrete and hitting the ground. Nothing too crazy, but I worked for my stepdad's company who had very sketchy equipment and no safety ropes or vests to make sure you don't plunge to certain death or permanent injury. We used the stack ladders. These ladders are very hard to assemble if you lacked upper body strength. Also, you very much want someone at the bottom holding you if you stacked 3 or more ladders. For gravity and sudden strong winds, that'll make you regret every decision you've ever made in your life when you get hit by one. Typing this out, our dangerous setup is the craziest part of this story. Anyways, I had 6 ladders stacked and I'm cleaning a 3rd-story window at a private residence, and as soon as I make the climb up the ladder into the window, I scared the crap out of a parrot sitting in a cage on the other side. This frickin' parrot lets out this shriek that scared the crap out of me because I didn't see the parrot at first. I was already nervous being 3 stories up on a sketchy ladder. I swear I almost fell backwards. I just hugged the ladder and wet myself and had to go back down because I was so shook. Climbing down was so nervous, and I've done it with ease before, but once you get used to it, and a short guy like I am, you don't get scared unless an unexpected parrot frickin' screams at you. My opa was a window washer. 2 things stand out. Once, he helped the police find a robber who was hiding. My opa had a bird's eye view. Another was when he saved a nurse in a psych ward who had been taken hostage by a patient. Dude had locked himself inside a room with her, and my opa had the master key. He went in and tackled the guy. Both times were back before the platforms. He'd hang outside of the windows with a leather belt that attached to a hook on the outside of both sides of the window. Well, your opa sounds like a pretty good guy. My buddy is a window cleaner over here in Philly, and last week on the job he was cleaning the windows, and a flock of birds started to attack him. He fell off of the platform, dangled there hanging from his safety harness, and fought back with his squeegee as a weapon. Not window washing related, but I feel like this story goes along the type of glimpsing into windows vibe that you're looking for. My wife and I moved into our apartment about 5 years ago, and pretty shortly afterward, a house was built right across the alley from us. No big deal, it's kind of a developing suburb, whatever. It was cool watching a house go up from an empty lot over the course of however many months. Well, the house was built, and then a year went by, and there were never any people around. Never a car in the driveway, never kids running around, or any sign that anybody was moving in. But there were always lights on. Like, it was kinda just on display. For a couple of years, it seemed like some real estate company just decided to build a house and never got around to selling it. This isn't that weird. There's a lot of property and houses for sale in our area. We were convinced that it was literally just a big, empty house. One night, wife and I decided to just look inside the one of the back windows, because hey, big empty houses are cool. The backyard was still kind of an empty dirt lot, and there was no fence. It was literally a 15-foot walk from where we would park our car every night. So honestly, not trying to do anything creepy, just trying to see what the interior of this big, new house looked like, we walked up and looked. Following our line of sight, our view was through the exterior window into what looked like a nice kitchen. Past that, a hallway, and directly through the open door of a bathroom where we saw an elderly woman with white, disheveled hair sitting on the toilet, weeping. We had no idea this house was inhabited at all, and we just witnessed what seemed like a pretty intimate moment. Or maybe every moment in that house was like that, who knows? We felt like we crossed such a line. It was so disturbing and unsettling. We went straight into our apartment and went to bed. The house is still there. We have no idea who actually lives there. Top 5 of one of the weirdest, most uncomfortable moments of my life. Honestly, if that were me, the next day I would have knocked on the door, explained that I had no idea someone lived there, and just, seen if the lady needed anything or if something was wrong. And yeah, I know it's not a window cleaning story, but I thought it was kind of funny. I worked as a commercial window cleaner for 2 years in the 90s, and one of my many window cleans involved cleaning the air traffic control tower glass. The controller had to visually identify the planes as they talked to the pilots. Anyway, after one of my not-so-good window washing efforts, the controller wrongfully identified an aircraft through his window and refused a passenger plane access to the runway. This cost many thousands in extra fuel and delayed several flights for the day. I lost my job and my employer lost the contract, all because of that damn middle bit of the window. Not only did you ruin your own day, but you also ruined the day of many other people. My God, what a catastrophic event to come from poorly cleaning a window. I'm not even sure if that's true though, because I'm pretty sure you have like codes and stuff you have access to get onto like airfields or strips or something like that, because I've flown a plane and I'm pretty sure I remember the main pilot that I was like flying with or who was watching my experience was telling me about these things. Not a window washer, but an engineer who does bosun chair drops for inspection or testing. We sometimes have hoses, so everybody thinks we're the window washers anyway. One residential tower, I got to a room with a doctor's examination table, with the stirrups used in a gynecological exams in a bedroom. The rest of the room definitely wasn't a doctor's office. On a shelf on the wall, a lot of toys, like dozens of them. Never got to see anybody going at it on a job, but I could hear them one time. Some guy had a bearded dragon almost fully grown just crawling around its office. It scared the living daylights out of me. Not a window washer, but a commercial window glazer. I was working on something like the 5th floor of a university campus office building. Sometimes we do windows that butt up to each other, so we caulk in between them with heavy-duty caulk. With this caulk, it is extremely common that we lick our middle fingers and use that to tool the caulk smooth. Gross, I know. We do that all the time. We can't see inside if there is anyone in there hardly ever. Well, some lady thought we were gesturing to her in an asexual way and called security on us. Oh, I don't know why this just reminded me of a misunderstanding of my own, where in high school my friends and I were messing around with my football and it went down the stairs, so I went to pick it up and my head accidentally went under a year 11 girl's skirt when I was in like year 8, I think, so all I see is her butt or something, and she turns around and goes, "You perv," and slaps me across the face. She slapped the crap out of me, and I'm just standing there like a bundle of nerves trying to be like, no, I went to pick up my ball, it's just, no. Not a window cleaner, but I inspect high-rise buildings' facades using the same type of scaffolding. We were doing a 53-story apartment building, and one of the apartments had a doll room. All of the dolls were incredibly creepy and looked very similar to the doll from Saw. I gotta say, Saw is one of those franchises I have never been able to get into. The torture aspect, I think, is what gets me. Like, I like a good horror movie or a slasher. The Scream trilogy by Wes Craven is honestly one of my favorite trilogies, actually. My girlfriend also showed me Texas Chainsaw Massacre recently, which I thought would be absolutely terrifying ever since I was a kid. Like, Leatherface freaked me out as a child, honestly. Then again, lots of things did, like Chucky. But no, it was well good, and I really love that stuff. But Saw, nah. Has a doctor ever misdiagnosed you? If so, how did it affect you? In my high school, my history teacher was misdiagnosed with cancer. I saw her go from depression to acceptance to anger in a span of 6 months. After she found out, I remember her asking the class if any of our parents were lawyers. I felt really bad for her. She was already thinking how to say goodbye to her 7-year-old. Not quite the same, but similar happened to me, only for a short time. I was at the ER coughing with pain, etc. I had x-rays done and my husband and I were waiting for the results. A doctor came in and told us he had bad news and that I had cancer. We were shocked and I started to cry. He looked at my name tag and said he'd be back. 10 minutes later, another doctor came in to tell me I had pneumonia and they would start treatment straight away. We asked about the cancer, but she didn't have any idea what we were talking about. Probably the only time I've been happy to have pneumonia. Our neighbor across the road had the reverse happen. The doctors kept telling her there was nothing wrong with her. By the time they finally diagnosed her breast cancer, it was too late. She was dead within a few months at 28, leaving a husband and 4 young children. I guess this is why hypochondriacs exist. When I was 14, I was told I was pregnant after getting an ultrasound to check my kidneys due to high blood pressure. No pregnancy test, no questions. I was a young girl, so I obviously was pregnant after they found an abnormal mass. Ended up being a cyst. None of the doctors would listen to me when I said that I had never even kissed a boy before. The sad part of the story was that after the doctor told my dad and me that I was 10 weeks pregnant, I adamantly denied that it was even possible. My dad actually stood up for me and took my side. The doctors then called my mom and accused my father of sexually assaulting me. Eventually, I was sent to a women's hospital and 2 hours later confirmed that I was not the Virgin Mary. Physically, it didn't affect me, but I've been very wary of going to doctors since. Sounds to me like that doctor thought he was frickin' House or something. But in all fairness, to some degree, I can kind of understand the wariness of some of these things. I ditched my GP after she accused me, an overweight and wearing an empire dress, of being pregnant and making me lay down on the exam table so she could feel my stomach. I didn't even get the dignity of peeing on a stick. She decided the best way to decide whether I was pregnant or not was to knead my stomach and declare it nice and soft. Grossish alert. My grandmother went to the doctor for blood in her stool and told her it was hemorrhoids. She asked him to perform some tests because she didn't believe it was just hemorrhoids. He refused and told her to come back if the H medication didn't work. It didn't, and it turns out she had colon cancer. It was so far along by this point that she passed 6 months after her diagnosis. Maybe some people would disagree, but I think if I told the doctor to give me tests because it would put my mind at ease or something, or it might make you discover something that might be even more wrong with me than we first imagined, then by God, I'm going to make them do it. Age 1. You have nerve damage from spina bifida that affects your bladder. Here, take this medicine and learn how to pee through a straw. Age 12. Oh, the medicine isn't working. Are you sure you're using it correctly? Age 16. Here, try Ditropan again. Age 21. Here, try bladder Botox. Age 22. Oh, hold up, there's something weird about your bladder. You also have a second ureter on your left kidney. Age 23. Yeah, you have a hole in your bladder that's probably congenital. There since birth. Wait 6 months and we'll get you in to fix that up. I've had multiple MRIs since birth, and apparently the second ureter and the hole in the bladder was somehow missed. I'm still waiting for the surgery date. I also want to make it clear that I have no ill thoughts about anyone who missed my diagnosis for so long. Stuff happens, and it's definitely not a reflection on my healthcare system. I'm more annoyed at my own body for being so messed up to begin with. The only person I'm annoyed with is the guy that told me I wasn't trying hard enough, and he's dead now, so I can't even be like, in your face, jerk. Personally, I think that's real cope, to be honest. No, your healthcare system really sucks if through 23 years of, having this checked out and no one really noticed this. I don't know, that's just my opinion. A psychologist I was seeing once gave me schizoaffective disorder, but walked it back to a temporary psychotic episode a few weeks later. Spent those few weeks in a state of shock and disbelief, though. Horrendous pain, vomiting. ER doc says that I have a lot of stool. I told the doctor that he wasn't the first person to tell me that I was full of crap, but that there was something else wrong. Another doctor says the same thing. I am becoming belligerent because of this nonsense and the excruciating pain. Third opinion doctor orders CT. I had gangrene on my appendix and it was hours from rupturing. Midnight emergency surgery. 5 days in the hospital. If I went along with what they had initially said, I would be dead. I went to an ER after driving to 12 feet. I heard something like a crackle and pool water drizzling down my throat through my ear, and immense pain. Upon describing this to the doctor at the ER, he diagnosed it as an ear infection, a 0 to full-blown ear infection, which had nothing to do with the dive, the nose, or the fact that pool water has a very distinct taste when it runs down the back of your throat. At my ear specialist, who I saw as soon as possible, I was correctly diagnosed with barotrauma. The effect from the first doctor was unnecessary agony for 24 hours because he apparently didn't get paid enough to listen to anything beyond the symptoms. At least in the end, it was a full recovery. When I was 15, my GP told my mum that the crippling pain below my sternum, the very upper part of my abdomen, was heartburn, and he prescribed antacids, ignoring the fact that this pain would literally have me on the floor in the fetal position crying. Heartburn. So, of course, the medicine doesn't work, and I deal with this pain several times a week for 4 years, until I'm 19 and deployed to Iraq. Thankfully, my NCO wouldn't listen when I had an attack and told him it'd pass. He sent me to our clinic. They draw blood, it's pancreatitis, secondary to gallstones. They removed my gallbladder and it got much better. I still have rare acute pancreatitis that I believe is from the damage of 4 years' worth of stones passing through my duct, that quack. I think the closest thing to any of these stories that I had is when I broke my foot. I went to the school nurse and she was like, it's fine, it's just a bruise. I was like, no, I literally can't walk, I'm going to the hospital. I went to my pediatrician when I was 19 about pains I had been having in my back. They were in a specific location, a bit left of my spine, center height, and would come suddenly, be quite intense, and then go away for a while. It wasn't a new feeling, but they were getting worse. She chalked it up to my anterior pelvic tilt, poor posture, lack of exercise, and prescribed me some workouts to do. It wasn't bad thinking on her part, as I wasn't in great shape at the time, but it definitely felt like she didn't take my symptoms very seriously. Maybe I didn't do a good enough job conveying the intensity. About a year later, I was at my parents' house, made myself a box of Kraft mac and cheese, and wound up in by far the most pain I've ever experienced. It's hard to describe the pain without sounding hyperbolic, but I'll say I was sat in a chair trying not to breathe and thinking about how long I could last before jumping headfirst over the balcony railing into the floor below. I can say with confidence I will never feel more physical pain, which is a strange thought. Fire department came to the house but were afraid to move me, thinking I had pinched a nerve. After a couple of hours in the chair, the pain somewhat suddenly vanished, and I had my dad drive me to the ER. Got to the ER, had an ultrasound which was awesome, and the docs found that my gallbladder was stuffed with gallstones. Not just a couple, but dozens, and 2 of them were about the size of quarters, which is also about the width of a gallbladder. These 2 stones alone were actually filling my gallbladder side to side. My gallbladder was also completely infected and had been for some time. Lots of WTF faces on the doctors that day. Turns out the stones had been building for years. They estimated that it started in middle school, and I had just gotten used to the random pain somehow. Pretty weird looking back on it. Anyway, they ripped that crap right out of me, and life's been a lot better since. I was just not diagnosed. Horrendously painful periods from the age of 9. I could barely get out of bed or go to school. They were heavy as well. My doctor, an older man, told me and my mother to suck it up, that it was all part of being a woman. I was depressed and lived like this for 9 years, barely getting out of bed for a week, at least a month, and missing heaps of school. Then I got pregnant at 17, which I now know is a miracle. Had my first ultrasound and my ovaries were covered in endometrial cysts. I tried to give birth naturally, but all the endometriosis and scarring made it impossible, so I had a C-section. After my C-section, the endometriosis held on to my C-section incision, causing severe pain, and unfortunately 2 more operations before that was cleared. I lived in severe pain for so long because my doctor thought periods should be painful. They shouldn't. If I had been diagnosed earlier, my body could have been prepared for pregnancy, though D's and C's and other procedures which could have made my pregnancy, birth, and recovery much easier. I went to the doctor with really bad food poisoning, and he told me it was nothing and that I should eat something like digestives, Graham biscuits, because I hadn't eaten for 3 days. Turns out that's absolutely the worst thing you can do with salmonella, as it strips your stomach lining. It felt like I'd eaten a bunch of razor blades. I ended up in hospital for the pain, and nobody told me what was wrong with me until after I was released. I would never have known if it wasn't for the phone call from the Center of Communicable Diseases. At risk of sounding stupid, I actually had no idea that's what salmonella does to you. I was misdiagnosed as having pneumonia. Pneumonia would have been preferable. I left work early one day because there was an extremely sharp pain in my back, just under my shoulder blade, as well as just underneath my ribcage on the same day. I was also having difficulty breathing. I miraculously managed to drive to the ER. In hindsight, I'm aware it was a dumb idea and got checked in. They gave me some non-narcotic painkillers, did some x-rays, and ran a few other tests. The doctor came in after a while and said I had pneumonia, gave me a prescription for a Z-Pack or whatever it's called, and discharged me. I had just driven out of the hospital and got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered and they said they were from the hospital. They requested for me to come back as quickly as I could. Don't bother checking in, just go straight back to the room I just left. I went back into the room and the doctor told me that they had looked at my x-rays again. Turns out my lung had collapsed. They rushed a specialist in immediately, like 10 minutes maybe, and were getting me prepped for surgery. Everything went pretty smoothly and everyone was extraordinarily nice to me. I'm positive everyone was so nice because there were definitely grounds for a lawsuit. I wasn't looking to get rich off anyone though, I just wanted to breathe again. I had extremely good insurance with the company I was with at the time. I paid $100 for the emergency room fee and the rest of the $1,700 bill was covered, so that was nice. While I was in there, a shirt popped up on the woot.com and I bought it immediately. It read, Lifetime Achievement Award for Breathing, Respiring Since Birth. I was in the hospital for almost not getting that very achievement. It was fate. I still have the shirt somewhere, but I got fat and it doesn't fit now. I've been told that quite a few people visited me while I was in the hospital. I don't remember most of them. I was on a bunch of diluted while I was awake. I do remember a buddy asking me how I peed with all the wires and the monitors attached to me and responding simply with my penis. He looked at my mom and said, "He'll be fine. He's too much of a butthole to die." Overall, I would rate having a collapsed lung as a terribly awful experience. You never really think about how much you breathe until you can't. It sucks. A lot. I'm certain I can imagine. Not me, but my mom. A few months ago, she was having this horrible pain in her lower abdomen, sides, and back. We put her symptoms into a symptom checker app, and one of the diagnoses that came up was an ectopic pregnancy. For those who don't know what that is, it's when the embryo begins forming in the fallopian tubes. When this is the case, it's pretty much a guarantee the baby won't make it, and it puts the mother's life at serious risk too. Anyway, silly little symptom app. Who cares? A few days later, she went to the doctor and got her blood tests done. The doctor came back with the results and told her she was pregnant. My mom knew it wasn't possible to have been recently, so she starts freaking out that the ectopic pregnancy is the case. And that's exactly what the doctor thought too. Meanwhile, every nurse and doctor in the building was rushing around, freaking out, trying to get her to the specialist. But they were too busy. So they started calling ambulances to rush her to the hospital. Amid all the chaos, the doctor approaches my crying mother and apologizes, saying he was looking at the wrong blood results. Blood results of hers almost exactly 3 years prior. She currently has a 2.5-year-old. Not exactly a misdiagnosis, but rather an unlucky train wreck of events. Anyways, when I was 14, I had appendicitis. Got home from school one Friday and thought I had a bad stomach ache. Got worse and worse, and finally on Sunday night, it burst. And yet, even then, my parents and I were just starting to think it might be my appendix. It was late that Sunday, so we decided to wait till morning. Side note, when I went into the ER, I was so sick I was hunched over and actually slightly pooped my pants. Went into the ER and got diagnosed, but had to wait another 7 hours to be absolutely sure that it was appendicitis because reasons. By the time they wheeled me into the OR, I was vomiting black bile. Woke up from surgery feeling slightly better, but totally knocked out from all the substances. Then my pain started to get worse, and the doctor told me I had an abscess in my abdomen because we waited so long to do the appendectomy. I had two options: get surgery, which would be a surefire but painful way to drain it, or be transferred to their main campus about 15 minutes away and do a procedure to put a drain into it. The drainage would take about a week. I opted for the week-long drain. The operation was successful, and a week later, I'm halfway out the door with the drain still in me as doctors are telling me how to take care of it at home. Then they drew my blood and saw that my white blood cell count was through the roof and made me stay again. I mean, my mom and I were packed up and I was dressed in actual clothes for the first time in a week. I was devastated. We were presented the same options as last time, but I opted for the surgery. As I was being prepped for this surgery, my doctor told me it would only take about an hour. Ended up being 6 hours. The abscess had been in my abdomen for so long that it had inflamed my intestines so badly they shredded my large intestines to near shreds. This was a laparoscopic surgery. My parents were told their son was still on the operating table after a 3-hour delay and given two choices: remove the damaged part of my intestines and run the risk of never being able to eat some foods ever again, or getting an ileostomy bag. They chose the latter. I woke up in the middle of the night in the ICU, completely zonked out and hearing my dad snore behind me. When I came to, I noticed the giant bulging red thing on my stomach with a bag over it, and it was moving. To say I was confused would be a wicked understatement. When the doctor came in the morning, they explained to me what that thing was. As they did, I wondered when I was going to get it off. I asked, "How long will this be on me? Like 3 weeks?" Bewildered, my doctor said, "That's going to be on you for at least 3 to 6 months. Floored, flabbergasted, at a complete loss for words. No words can describe the confusion and complete bewilderment that I had in that moment. I was in shock for the next week until one nurse asked if I wanted to name it Jeffrey the Stoma. Gone but never forgotten. She changed my outlook on the whole situation. If I was going to have this bag of poop hanging from my stomach, might as well make the most of it. It wasn't easy. I had to cut most of the foods I normally ate, like like greasy stuff out of my diet since it went straight through my small intestines and into the bag like water. The bag would constantly spill in the middle of the night and I'd wake up covered in poop. But I made it. Surgery day finally arrived 4 months later and Jeffrey was gone. And then things went from bad to worst in a matter of minutes. I was sitting in the play area they had since I was in the pediatric wing and wanted to walk about. This was about 3 days after the surgery. I was being visited by a friend at that time when I got a sharp pain in my stomach, but it was easily ignorable. It got progressively worse. My thought process went like this: I'll be fine. I'll just take some pain meds when I get back to my bed. I'll see if I can ask for pain meds right now since I'm carrying my IV around with me anyways. I'm going to die, aren't I? Literally minutes before I was walking around by myself with little to no help. Now I was screaming in pain, trying to even lift myself off the couch and into a wheelchair. We waited a week when we decided that I needed another surgery and probably would have another ostomy. 2 side notes. 1. I spent my 15th birthday eating ice chips. 2. Because I was so dejected that I was getting another ostomy right before my surgery, my mum went and got me a small amount of what I had been craving all week: apple juice. I hadn't been able to eat or drink for the whole week, so that juice was still the greatest thing I've ever tasted in my life. I told the doctor right before, and he silently put a finger up to his lips and smiled. Awesome dude. After the surgery, they found an entire liter of feces that was spilling out due to the intestine reconnection failure. I had also been incredibly bloated and looked pregnant, says my mom. The failed surgery left me in the ICU for a week, barely managing to even stay alive, let alone awake for more than 15 minutes at a time. I just laid in my bed for an entire week, sweating, probably gallons of sweat every day, and watching Food Network and requesting that my mom make that when I go out. I recovered from the ICU, then got out a week later with another ostomy bag. Didn't even bother naming this one because at this point I just wanted to be done with the medical problems forever. 6 months later, in the middle of my freshman year of high school, I got it removed once and for all, and thus ends my story. What a champ you are. I could not imagine being in the hospital for that long. I think I broke my foot in high school and I was there for maybe a week or so and I was utterly miserable. So, 6 months. I was told by the receptionist at A&E that I should go home because it's probably a migraine. It was bacterial meningitis. I am overweight. I don't sleep enough. I am exhausted all the time. I bruise easily. It feels like I have the full body arthritis on a bad day. For years, my doctor has said, "You're fat. Lose weight." For years, I have refined my diet up to my activity level. I got a little less fat, still didn't sleep, body hurt more. Brain tumor. It was a tumor. Granted, the best kind of tumor, small and benign. It destroyed my self-confidence. I went through years of frustration and self-doubt. My health continued to suffer as the tumor grew and completely shut down my endocrine system. And let me tell you, dealing with a non-functioning endocrine system is something else. But at least I know now what is wrong. That sounds like it friggin' sucks. Like, I'm someone who cares a lot about their personal fitness and everything, but it must suck when you go to the doctors and every time it's like, "Oh, you're fat. You're fat. That's the reason why anything's wrong with you. It's because you're fat." And you're just sat there like, "Can we run some tests or maybe explore some other possibilities? Because I think it's more than that." It's like, "No, it's because you're fat." On that note, though, if you're happy with your body the way that it is, I'm glad for you. But keep in mind that your personal physical fitness and health is all your personal responsibility, and obesity does cause its own fair share of issues.
What's the smallest amount of power you've seen go to someone's head? Public school bus driver for a poor farming area, middle school aged. We weren't allowed to talk, even at a murmur. Turn our heads, read, or do homework. The ride was an hour each way. Any infractions, he would pull over and scream at us, and usually give any kids involved and whoever was next to them a multiple-day bus ban. Rural, poor area from the school meant a lot of kids just couldn't go to school those days. Our bus was always late because he pulled over 4 to 5 times a day. He would make personal stops to his home because F you, that's why. 20 years later, and still a hard contender for biggest loser I've ever met. I'm just picturing this one loser bus driver, impacting the entire education of this rural area. I mean, usually I feel bad for bus drivers or just about anyone that has to deal with the public in some capacity, and not this time. This guy just sounds like he really, really, really sucks.
I worked at Blockbuster. One of the employees, Melanie, got a key holder promotion over me. We didn't really like each other, but it wasn't a blood feud. One day, the manager calls me to sub in for someone who called out sick. It's my day off. I'm at college and don't have my uniform. I tell the manager this and she says I need a body here to work the register. Come in naked. Just get here ASAP. I show up in normal clothes and I've been working with another key holder for about 6 hours. Melanie comes in to rent something because it's her day off and flips the F out. She goes back to the office and proceeds to write me up for failing to comply to dress code and so on. She then proceeds to try and make me sign it then and there, all while off the clock. She's still hourly. She does this for the next 2 hours until the store closes. No dice. I tell her to sit and spin on it. Manager comes in the next morning to a crap storm. Melanie gets written up for working off the clock, tells her I acted on a direct order from her, and she needs to get off her frickin' high horse. Alright, so I was a PA, production assistant, the lowest of the low on a film set, for a Kelsey Grammer submarine comedy called Down Periscope. One guy was giving the meaningless title of Key PA and decided he was going to help wrangle background extras for this big exterior shot we're working on. Now, everyone, including the extras, knew that the camera was probably framed in a medium close-up on the principal actors who were doing a scene way down at the end of the dock. Nonetheless, Key PA guy took it upon himself to start blocking out whole entire scenes of these background extras. I'm talking crowds of people. You guys over there, your families of the sailors who haven't seen your husbands in 6 months and you run from the bus to the fence, but you guys are cadets who get in the way and you guys are arguing about which car has the right of way. Then all you kids start clapping because you see a big doggy pulling his owner so fast he trips over the leash. Like second unit on a Michael frickin' Bay movie. He had these people doing this made-up little scene over and over and over. He'd yell at them, tell them they did it wrong and reset them back to 1 to start over. Madness. I walked by the guy and noticed this was going on and said, "You know, the camera is pointed the other direction, right?" He just laughed and said, I know. Software developer here. We had a guy appointed as the change manager in charge of enforcing controls and coding standards. He was not a programmer. He would regularly reject changes because he didn't like how variables were named. Like he would want cust count renamed to CSTMR-CNT. Sounds kind of petty and like he felt like he had to do something, so he was just like, no, I don't like that, change it. When I played Halo 2, I joined a fairly large clan that had some pretty cool people in it. We did a lot together, and every once in a while they would elect a new forum moderator/officer to run the ranks. One day they elect this kid who sounded like he was 11 to be a new officer. He seemed pretty down to earth, but the very next day he gets home from school and starts kicking every single person from the clan who just even slightly brushed him the wrong way. It was so bad that the leader, who was on vacation in Hawaii, had to log on a library computer in order to strip all powers from this kid. The kid's reasoning was that he didn't get picked for a baseball game at school and was angry the rest of the day. Which is why you don't give children power, because they have no idea how to communicate their feelings or separate their emotions from one situation to their emotions in another situation. Years ago, while working in a pizza place, our manager had to leave on a family emergency and left a girl in charge until one of the other shift runners could get there. He lived about 45 minutes away, and in that 45 minutes, this girl who was left in charge actually called one of her friends and hired her, saying she was the manager now, wrote me up for putting too much cheese on a pizza, and actually told one of the drivers he was fired because she didn't like his attitude. When the shift runner got there to take over, this girl also told him not to worry about it, and she had things under control. End result, her friend was not hired, my write-up for using too much cheese was torn up, the fired driver, who never left the parking lot, kept his job, and she quit a few days later because we were unprofessional and the manager played favorites. I lived in a village for a few months, and one of the richer farmers' wives got the job of running the community center. She put out a big placard with a picture of herself and titled herself CEO, as well as on business cards. Started wearing business suits and banning people she didn't like the look of. The building was the size of a small apartment and hosted a knitting and Bible club for senior citizens. Used to work with a group of interns in an office, and for some reason I still don't understand, they decided to promote one of us over the others. Their job was basically just to schedule who was doing what and when. That's it. Only took 2 weeks before we found out she was keeping detailed notes on all of our mistakes and taking them to upper management. They promptly told her to calm the F down and decided to do away with the position. She made a lot of enemies that day. She had ambitions of working at the company and was trying to make us all look bad. I think that one may have backfired on her. My favorite power trip was from one of my students. I had placed my kids in groups for a big project and gave them the option to elect their leader for each group. I intentionally placed all the quiet kids together thinking nobody would overpower their ideas. I was so wrong. Vincent was elected leader because none of the other quiet kids wanted the responsibility, and he immediately became a despot, controlling whether they were allowed to ask me questions, giving assignments and dictating the exact outcome, loudly berating his teammates if a drawn picture was even millimeters off center. I want you to understand that before this, Vincent would hardly raise his voice when I made him answer questions for the class. After a day of guiding him toward better leadership strategies, I came in like the goddamn US Marines and deposed him, but better than the US because I facilitated the next election. The students decided no joint power between two entities, so no single person would let the power go to their head. It would have been a great teachable moment for checks and balances, but we were studying anthropology, so I let it go and always looked sideways at Vincent after that. There's always some shy, weak person that's waiting for an opportunity to grab a power and then abuse it. I mean, this is literally why I've always said don't trust people that do their utmost best to appear absolutely harmless. A girl I worked with was promoted to assistant manager at a Little Caesars because she was the only one there that was 18. She went from an okay worker to not doing anything and making my time there a living hell. I eventually quit and was asked to come back after she was fired. 5 years later, I got a random Facebook message from her apologizing for being such a douche during that time. I once worked part-time doing inventory. We would go to stores like the Bay, Whole Foods, and literally count everything on the shelves with our fancy, dancy machines. This one man was given leadership of the home section. Now, he wasn't actually given any management power, made the same amount as everyone else, all that. Just literally, he was told, okay, you and these people are going to the home section, divvy it up however. He went full power trip mode, micromanaging how I counted towels, patrolling the aisles, watching us all, yelling unnecessarily. From that day on, he was known as King Tut. That reminds me when I worked with this guy called Ivan. I think he was from Bermuda or something like that. He was okay, but he was like weirdly demanding and insistent that his way be the way that everyone worked, and yeah, I called him Ivan the Terrible. The upperclassmen at my university would proctor exams the freshmen would take. I wasn't there for this, but my friend tells me the story of how he and Lewis were the two proctors while the professor was in the office down the hall. Apparently, in an effort to prevent cheating, Lewis brought a clipboard and noted when and where each student went to the bathroom. Where, meaning that he would force students to use different bathrooms. The justification being that I suppose they could leave secret notes or something? So once the bathroom on the 1st, 2nd, and 8th floor each had one person go there, he made a kid use a bathroom in the building next to ours. Kid complains to the other proctor who grabs the professor who kicks Lewis from the job. Lewis, I know you use Reddit and I know you might see this and I'm sure you'll figure out who I am. You're a frickin' C-word. You know, I don't know about this one. I think Lewis is being kind of smart, to be honest. I mean, still unreasonable, but still smart. Probably to my own head, when I was about 8 years old, I was asked by the teacher, because I was being a well-behaved little boy, to stand by the whiteboard while she was talking about something and write the names of people who were talking and acting out on the board. I went mad with power and wrote people's names down who just looked at me funny. In elementary school, I was on the safety patrol, which basically meant that I stood at the busy intersection alongside an adult crossing guard, and when he went into the street to stop traffic, I would let the little kids know it was safe to cross. I also told other kids not to run, etc. Well, one day, a girl, a grade below me, walked up the hill from elementary school to the intersection instead of taking the stairs. So I grabbed her by the arm and marched her back to the stairs and told her she had to take the stairs. Proto-fascist right here. I got in trouble for it. Girl I was waitressing with, just us two, was going to be a manager, but wasn't a manager yet. She flipped out because I had a contraction and sat down a minute, screamed in front of patrons that she was my supervisor, she was better than me, and if I didn't like it, I could effing leave. I clocked out and quit on the spot. The captain, aka coach's kid on my 4th grade hockey team, ran into him in high school and we were trying to figure out where we knew each other from. I eventually said, "Oh, you were on my hockey team in 4th grade." His response years later, "Your hockey team? Wow, that's funny. It was my hockey team." Honestly, I just think that's a hilarious response. My friend is the co-maid of honor in her sister's destination wedding. Her sister and her sister's fiancé are great friends of mine, and my friend and her husband are even closer, and she thinks she can control people's plans and arrangements. For example, I booked the resort through Amex instead of the room block, and months after booking, she is still fighting me about it. The bride and groom don't give a frick and have told me they would have done the same thing. My younger sister got an Xbox 360 some years ago on Christmas. Whenever my younger sister or I would ask to play, she would boss us around first, but ultimately deny us. Get me some juice first, bring me some snacks, make my bed. Me and my younger sister were just like, "Can we play now?" "No, you shouldn't have trusted me. Female dog." I had an older brother, I know that feeling, the whole you do the things that they ask you and then they literally turn around and go, "You shouldn't have trusted me." I'm pretty sure, yeah, they literally did that to me once and I was seething. I have a big group of friends who go to the local park on a regular basis and play outdoor games and board games. I bought a set of lawn darts as well as numerous other games. We were deliberately in a part of the park where no other people were around for at least 100 meters. The patrol drove up in a little cart. This fussy man got out, hooked his thumbs into his belt loops and shambles over to me like a Western cartoon character. The only thing he was missing was hay in his teeth and a hat to tip back. He tried to confiscate my lawn darts as they posed a danger to the public. I pointed out there was no public around outside of our group. Then he went with the line that the little lady was using them incorrectly and posing a danger to myself. I was 38 at the time and I am 5'10". I towered over his little diminutive self, and lady is not the first word I would use to describe myself. I asked him on whose authority he was confiscating my games and to show me the bylaw that allowed this. I even pulled out my phone to look up the park rules. He started to get flustered, and by this point my friends were openly laughing at his routine. He backed off and drove away. Later that day, when one of us made a complaint at the office, we learned he was actually the park maintenance man, garbage collector, and had zero authority. He wasn't even supposed to be driving that particular vehicle. Was the garbage collector douchey? Yes, but do you also sound like a douche? In my humble opinion, yes, but only when they start ragging on the person's size and stuff. They can't help that. My boss recently found out that he's related to Michelle Obama. He bragged about it all day. Self-roast. When I was in 2nd grade, we played a class maths game that included some quick mental thinking. There was a prize, the big digit timer. That was literally a timer or clock my teacher had probably gotten from the supermarket. It took most of the year for someone to finally win it, that person being me. Cut to a week later, and when someone insulted me, my go-to response of, "Yeah, well, I won the big digit timer and you didn't." Literally a frickin' timer. That's just another one that I find really funny. My boyfriend has his name on the title of the house next to his father's. My boyfriend and I live in a house that his dad bought for him so he could avoid dorm living. His sisters were living with us while they attended school with him, and they still drop by whenever they need to, and they're allowed to just walk in whenever. His dad shows up whenever he wants and needs to as well. Yet my boyfriend will get on the mic on his games, and when his friends start talking mad crap, he just goes, "Well, at least I own my own house." "Yeah, but I have my own house. I'm going to college and I own a house. We can't afford to pay rent. His dad is paying for us to live here and buying our groceries. His dad also takes care of 100% of all the problems that happen with the house and whatnot. His dad technically owns the car my boyfriend drives. He has not paid for anything. Hell, I've paid more in rent and other expenses in total than he has. My daughter in 5th grade, when they gave her a safety patrol badge, oh my god, it was awful. We called her Paul Blart behind her back. She wasn't as incompetent as he was, but to say that she was taking her job seriously was an understatement. That just sounds cute. So, I'm not proud of this, that needs to be said. In high school, my boyfriend slid into home base, literally, this is not an innuendo, and sacrificed his ankle for a home run. I drove him to the emergency room, and when his mom arrived, I volunteered to go get food to escape her and feed his teammates. While waiting for my pizza at a nearby joint, the kind with games and crap for kids, I decided it would be so cool if I brought toppings with me. I was known as a bit of a rule follower, so I thought snagging the glass pepper and cheese shakers would would make me look cool? I don't know, it was frickin' stupid. So I casually put them in my purse and internally applaud myself for being such a rebel. Then it happens. Miss, are you stealing those? I turn around to see a kid who is probably my age but seemed much more authoritative in that moment, looking rather indignant. He pointedly grabs my purse and gazes at the contraband, then looks at me with true disdain. I mean, you'd think there were dead kittens in that bag. He then proceeds to lecture me about theft. I was scared at first, my first criminal act was not going well, but then he starts talking about these condiments like they're housed in his great Nana's priceless glass cheese and pepper shakers. He starts threatening legal action, and now I'm mortified. I break a rule and my first ever police report will say, stole cheese. After several minutes of the sternest talking to ever be given by a mother frickin' busboy, the manager comes strolling by. The kid stops him to tell him what I've done. He is glowing with self-righteousness, like this act is one that will finally show his worth. They may let him run the ticket counter, or dare I say, work the actual register due to his courageous act of stopping yet another thief from taking red pepper flakes. Well, he was wrong. The manager looks at him, and with all the passion that can be mustered by a middle-aged man managing a pizza chain with skee-ball machines, he shrugs and says, "Okay, did you get them back?" Busboy proudly holds the sacred objects for his manager to see, nods the affirmative, and waits for his praise. The praise does not come. His manager simply shrugs again and mumbles, "Okay." Busboy is bruised, but not broken. He then enthusiastically suggests to the manager that the authorities be called and charges be filled so that I may be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. This woke his manager up a bit. His eyes widened and he looks at the busboy and asks, "Are you insane? You got the shakers back. We are done here." It was a hit for sure. Busboy is shocked. This is simply not how he saw this playing out. He thought this was his ticket out of cleaning puke out of the ball pit, but no. As he suffered through what I'm sure were flashbacks of the weekend of 8-year-old birthday party soda experiments and the mess those make, I realized that I was never in danger. This busboy was riding so high on the perceived power bestowed upon him by his pizza overlords, I had been scared. But he had no power here. As he regained composure and tried to save face by letting me off with a stern warning, I just laughed. I took my pizza and no condiments, and I left. I'm pleased that I do not have a police record, even more so that I don't have one that mentions Parmesan cheese, all because of the power-crazed busboy in history. Some people gotta really stop and think, am I being a total Jobsworth about this? Like, yeah, they were right to grab them and be like, no, don't steal the shakers, but then they just took it to a whole nother level that it didn't need to be taken to whatsoever. Like, yeah, don't let people steal from you, full stop. It sets a bad example and, people think you're weak. Man was trying to go above and beyond and just ended up looking like a fool. I bussed for a month at a restaurant before being promoted, but during that time, one of the managers would use the busboys as her personal assistants. She would have us do the small jobs she had to do while bussing. She also asked us the same way every time. Could you pretty please get me ice? Could you pretty please carry the boxes for me? Could you pretty please go get my food for me? She was older and had no husband, but desperately wanted a rich guy, and she also had a wild booger sugar addiction. I work at a big factory as the lowest level of manager, 5th level. Sometimes I work in projects with a guy in 2nd level management. He steps up to location manager, 1st level. Whenever our location manager is away. One day while working on a project, our location manager was away, and the guy I worked with had to leave in a minor emergency, water leak at home. He made me sign a document really quick, gave me a phone, and left. After reading the document, I quickly realized I was acting location manager. I went down a level to 3rd level management to visit my boss's boss and told him he was doing a good job and to keep it up. Priceless look on faces ensued. I don't know why, but I really thought that this was going to go in the direction of, so as acting location manager, I then handed off the position to the next guy beneath me and effed off to do something that I wanted to do, like visit someone or do something or go somewhere. I just today watched an 18-year-old kid get forklift certified. While loading up trucks, he got the nerve to start barking orders at a senior staff, including myself, and hastily was revoked of his license. He didn't say a word as he left work today. My 5-year-old won the kindergarten Olympics. He was a complete butthead for about a week. When I worked at McDonald's, a teenager was made temporary assistant manager for a little under an hour and threatened to send 3 people home. That guy got his hours cut real quick. Twitch mods, it's hilarious. They can be given mod for no reason, and they are so stupid they actually think they are like a law enforcer. Young teens being given the power to ban people at will, and you can actually feel the inflation and narcissism. It's hilarious. Forklift certified? Well, that's your problem right there, don't you know? Getting forklift certification can corrupt you even faster than the one ring to rule them all. It takes a very special person to wield that kind of power. Lawyers, what's a case you regretted winning? I'm a work comp attorney, now represent injured people, but used to work on other side insurance defense. There was an applicant with a serious injury, fell off a ladder, busted back with fusion, shoulder screwed. Years of treatment, internal issues, psych issues, really just messed up. 50% plus permanent disability. We were 5 years in and finally getting to settlement time. If we bought out his future medical settlement pretty far into 6 figures, this guy was the sole provider for wife and 2 kids. Then we found out he had aggressive brain cancer. Expected only a couple of years to live at best. Thus, we wouldn't buy out future medical anymore. Still got permanent disability for $60K-ish, but can't give medical buyout based on 25-plus year life expectancy anymore. I felt terrible for the guy and his family. Me and the adjuster tried to get insurance to agree to some sort of amount like 5-year buyout, but the bean counter said hell no. The attorney knew it wasn't me making the decision. Even though he worked on that guy's file for 5+ years, he decided to take $0 in fees. I have so much respect for that attorney turning down $10K plus in fees to help his client in a very crappy situation. Yeah, I can't lie, if I were a lawyer on the other side of that, I'd probably be laying awake at night thinking about that guy and his family. And clearly this guy does. I do family law, and I represented a father who had lost most of his custody from illegal substance use and imprisonment as a result. He came to me saying he was clean and doing good and had his life together, and it checked out. He had been clean for almost 9 months, not counting jail time, and seemed sincere in wanting to resume a full relationship with his son. The other side fought viciously to keep him in extremely little custody and supervised at that, but we prevailed and got an order restoring family frequent unsupervised partial custody. Not long afterwards, only about 3 months after the case, he was back to doing illegal substances, sold most of his furniture, and for me the most soul-crushing is that he set up a fake GoFundMe stuff for his child's cancer. His child didn't have cancer and has never had cancer, so you know where that money was going. I withdrew my appearance at this point, so I don't know what happened afterwards, but I imagine and hope his custody was taken away. Basically, the net result of winning that case was that the poor boy had to witness his father relapse onto illegal substances and was exploited for money. Worst case I ever won. I work in medical malpractice defense. Once I had an obstetrician or gynecologist who burned a patient during a procedure. When I met with the doctor, he lied to me throughout the representation over 16 months, saying he had no idea how it happened. There is a doctrine in law called res ipsa, meaning absent some sort of negligence. This accident could not have occurred. Woman came in without a burn, and after the procedure, the woman left with a burn. There's no way this doctor didn't know what had happened. The area of the burn was where he was operating on. It wasn't until I brought up settlement, because this was not a case we could win, did he say, "Oh, maybe I do know what happened." We ultimately settled that case, which is considered a favorable outcome considering the potential high monetary verdict. Sometimes I think this doctor really ought to have lost that case and their license. I wouldn't say I regret this so much as to this day it amazes me. As a first-year associate, I was given a terrible PI case where my client received a flu shot and thereafter felt pain in his shoulder. He went to another doctor who performed an MRI and determined he had a torn rotator cuff, which was undoubtedly not related. My job was to allege the flu shot caused the rotator cuff tear. Our author actually correlated the two, which is the more regrettable position, and the case paid out. Being the bottom of the totem pole, I had no choice but to take the case, which was handed down by a partner, but at the same time just overwhelmingly made me feel like the worst stereotyped attorney and just hated having to walk into court on it and feel my reputation being destroyed. I'm just picturing this dude walking in court and be like, "Your Honor, I feel offended because this is just so stereotypical evil lawyer. I don't want to be that guy. Is it fair that I go through years of school and training to get to this specific job only to be stereotyped so callously?" I do juvenile work, criminal law and family law. I represented this client first when he was a juvenile charged with disorderly conduct at school and fighting. Then, when he became an adult, it was for simple things like possession of the devil's lettuce. As he got older, it became easier and easier to figure out what part of his life hasn't gone as well as it could, and I tried to counsel him and push him to better himself. He got his GED, he started going to NA, he started classes at a community college and found a part-time job. On the night of his 21st birthday, he was charged with a DWI. Of course, I'll take care of that too. About 6 months later, we are due in for court for a trial on a Monday, and he doesn't show up, which at this point in his life is highly unusual. As I'm trying to figure out where he is, the court starts going over arraignments, first appearances, and then, lo and behold, 3 people are up for murder charges. The prosecution starts to tell the judge what the facts and circumstances of the case are and mentions a few victims' names. Apparently, my client was at a party when these 3 individuals decided to allegedly do a drive-by. My client suffered from multiple wounds and didn't make it to the hospital. So, by default, as you can't prosecute a dead person, the state has to take a dismissal. I guess technically a win. Either way, it was crushing to me as I thought he had really turned his life around. As a personal injury attorney, I've seen a few clients with the blue-collar lotto or getting more money than they reasonably know how to deal with. I do my best to educate them, but my job is to try and maximize their recovery, not to teach them finance, and I have definitely contributed to a few illegal substance habits. In one of my first cases after passing the bar exam, a young man retained me on a drunk driving charge. No one was hurt, but he totaled his car. During trial, the arresting police officer testified that my client was clearly drunk at the accident scene and that my client was loudly blaming the accident on a freaking butthole who stole his car, crashed it, and then fled before the cops arrived. However, according to the 2 other witness statements tendered into evidence, it was my client's friend, the passenger, who was screaming about the butthole who stole the car, not my client, the driver. The cop must have confused the 2 men during his testimony. This discrepancy raised a reasonable doubt in the judge's mind, so she acquitted my client. At the time, the acquittal was somewhat unexpected for me. In my personal view, my client was clearly drunk and responsible for the accident, regardless of who was blaming the mystery butthole to the cops. But I was happy my client got off, no one was hurt, and lessons were learned, and I was quite euphoric to have won my first criminal case. The regret? About a month after the acquittal, my young client called me at 3 a.m. from the police station saying, "It's me again. The police arrested me for drunk driving again. Can you help me?" Not only did I answer no, I instantly regretted getting the earlier acquittal. My client apparently didn't learn any lessons. You can't save everybody, some people just can't learn a freaking lesson to save their life. I got a spoiled brat of a teenager cleared of a shoplifting charge when he absolutely had done it. His rich parents hired me to represent him. I did that to the best of my ability, and we went to trial and won, but I can't say I felt good about it. This kid needed to be taught some accountability for his actions, and his parents just wanted to buy their way out of any trouble he got into. Had this happened to me twice. Got my client out on bail only to thereafter have him up and killed. First time he was in a building, supposedly selling, got chased by the police and a struggle ensued where he was smoked point blank in the head. Mother told me that it was my fault that he was killed and that I was working with the DA and the police. Second time, a young man no more than 16 gets released while waiting trial on robbery. One of the conditions of release was that he was to maintain a curfew. That very night, he breaks curfew, goes over to somebody else's house, and was killed in a illegal substance-related robbery. Mother blamed me and said that the devil was working through me, that we were all demons. Criminal defense is a hard business. Did a divorce where the husband, who I was representing, wanted to trade custody of his children for a set of bedroom furniture. The bedroom furniture was not even like a family heirloom. It was furniture that you could probably get at a Rooms to Go or something. Still makes me ill. That's why I got out of family law. I'm picturing that father looking up at the judge and saying, "Your Honor, I love my children with all my heart, truly, but that furniture means the world to me. I won a summary judgment motion that my firm filed not expecting to win. We had a decent argument, but odds were way worse than a coin flip, and judges don't like granting summary judgment because it's an extreme remedy. The client initially was thrilled. Case is over. We tried to break the news gently. Nope. 3 years later, we're back in the same spot we were before. We won our motion. The other side appealed it up to the state Supreme Court and won because the Supreme Court said the trial judge should have denied our motion. So, we're back at square one, north of $100,000 in legal bills with no resolution. Maybe it'll settle, maybe it will go to trial. I'll find out in the next 3 to 4 months. The one I particularly hated happened at my first law job. This woman was a long-term client of my boss. In the past 10 years or so, she has been caught driving under the influences 8 times, violated home incarceration countless times, been caught with controlled substances a few times, and stabbed 2 people on home incarceration. My boss at the time was the master of getting people off for DUIs, so she had only been convicted of a DUI third and always managed to stay on home incarceration with whatever releases she desired. I always regretted her cases because that woman is truly a danger to the public. She's undoubtedly going to kill someone someday, but I'll be damned if she isn't the luckiest woman alive in getting away with DUIs. A little late to the party, but I've got one I still think about a lot. Worked in criminal defense, represented a guy in a DUI. He had priors, so another conviction meant time, loss of license, problems. Long story short, he was pulled over by police after they followed him leaving a bar. At trial, I elicited admission from the arresting officer that during the 2.5 miles he followed him for, he did not observe a single moving violation. No speeding, erratic driving, driving over the lines, blowing stop signs, running red lights, didn't even stop suddenly at red lights. Also got the DRE officer to testify that the accused only spoke Spanish and they couldn't get interpreter officer to the roadside to explain the field sobriety exercises, which the officer documented the accused refused to perform. Jury came back in 15 minutes. Guy was extremely grateful and his lovely family was very gracious in thanking me and our office. Feel good about the whole thing. A couple months later, I'm in county to meet with a client, and I see him in one of the pods. Find out sometime after the trial, he violently and sexually assaulted his stepdaughter. I think about that one a lot. There was this case I saw that involved a claim with free shifting, meaning that if the plaintiff won, their attorney's fees would get paid by the defendant. Defendant pushed an aggressive legal position at trial that the judge agreed with and won, avoiding a few thousand in liability to the plaintiff and a few thousand in attorney fees. So far, so good. But then the plaintiff appeals all the way to the state's high court, requiring a ton of briefing and time. High court agrees with plaintiff, reserves and sends back to the trial court, which now enters judgment against the defendant for a few thousand in damages against the plaintiff and tens of thousands of dollars in attorney's fees from the appeal. The defense lawyer probably regretted winning at first on that aggressive argument to the trial court. This is honestly making me realize that court, law and order, all this crap is way more complicated than proving your client's innocence or, the other person's guilt, whatever. I mean, hell, I've always known that you can have a bent jury that are just really one-sided in their opinion on basically whatever the heck they want to feel like on any given thing, whether it be race, politics, or anything of the sort, sympathy even. God, I would hate to be a lawyer. This probably won't be the best answer, but this is a real one. After law school, I had to turn down a criminal defense job offer because my wife got a better offer somewhere else. So basically, I followed her along and was desperate to find something after 3 months of fruitless efforts. I would take just about any job that required a JD, whereas literally the only thing I ever wanted to do was criminal defense. 3 months after moving, I got an interview for a real estate litigation job. They hired me the next day. Looking back, that was probably red flag number 1. First day on the job, they taught me how to foreclose on a claim line. These are 2 things I had never heard of before. Turns out it is totally brainless work if you have the right forms. Mind-numbingly boring, basically just cutting and pasting new addresses and amounts owed. So anyways, it took me about 2 months to realize this when I had my first set of hearings. But literally my sole purpose at the firm, which represented over 100 homeowners associations, was to take people's houses away for not paying their homeowners association dues. After my first set of foreclosures, I I actually slipped into a pretty legitimate depression. I was getting paid peanuts to drive nearly an hour to work every day to do work I despised on behalf of people I literally could not pretend to care about. The straw on the camel's back was when I started signing the foreclosure and realized I was that guy, you know? I understand someone has to do the work, I guess. There certainly is a lot of money to be made, but it was not for me. I did that job for 3 months, came home one Friday and told my wife I'd rather be homeless than go back on Monday. By some stroke of luck, I started a stellar criminal defense job within 2 weeks, and all of the heartache that has 100% been worth it. I've won a lot of cases. You have to redefine winning and losing when doing criminal defense, because sometimes even a particularly juicy plea is a win in my opinion, and never once felt bad about it. For example, I got a guy's plea deal cut from 60 years to 15 years for a string of robberies where the interrogations and confessions were overwhelmingly unconstitutional. Like the interrogations were textbook how not to do an interrogation, Missouri versus Siebert, and stuff like that. Never lost sleep over someone not going to jail. So yeah, every case where I took someone's house away, probably 24 times for not paying HOA fees, generally $4,000 or less, was the worst case I ever won. F HOAs.
Well, that's my humble opinion. I just think lawyers are kind of scummy overall.
Family law is a little different in that you never really win, per se. You may get more favorable rulings or better terms, but unless the opposing party did something illegal or mind-bogglingly stupid, it's never a decisive win, really. Although I did have a case where my client fought really hard for the dog and then ended up turning him over to a shelter. Frickin' douchebag. The ex-wife received an anonymous tip and was able to get him back quickly. Yeah, I feel like any couple that's having a messy divorce is usually like, how can I hurt them? Oh, I'll take their pet that they love and adore, and then get rid of them immediately or put them down. And it's utterly unnecessary in my opinion. I know a lawyer who had a divorce file a long time ago where she represented the husband, and the husband fought and fought and fought for this painting that the wife's mother had gifted them. It wasn't valuable or anything, but it was a gift from her deceased mother, and he would not settle without it. So she acquiesced and delivered the painting to her lawyer, who delivered it to the husband's lawyer for him to pick up. He never did. It's still sitting in the lawyer's office after years, unless she's tossed it by now. He didn't want the painting, he just didn't want her to have it. Summer of 2018, I get work regarding what seemed, from the client's description, as a pretty drawn-out and messy divorce case. The husband was my client, and he seemed very adamant that his soon-to-be ex-wife was after every penny he had. Given he seemed to have a fairly high-paying job, it seemed like a pretty common type of case. The city I work in has many instances of this. It has a high cost of living and a lot of well-paid working professionals in private industry. He was a very well-spoken, amicable guy in his late 50s, and truly seemed like he'd been taken by surprise and betrayed by his soon-to-be ex-wife. When I actually got the case, however, I was basically floored. His wife was a working professional as well, worked in government. They'd been married for over 20 years and had 2 kids together and a paid-off house. Before taxes, he made almost 3 times what she did, not counting his stock options, and yet she'd contributed equally to their mortgage on every home they'd owned over the course of the marriage. By all accounts, despite a vast difference in income, she'd carried her weight, raised 2 kids, and worked full-time during the entirety of the marriage. I live and work in Canada. She could have easily raked him over the coals in the divorce if it had gone to court. Instead, it seemed like she'd done everything she possibly could to not have him subjected to that. This divorce had been ongoing for 5 years before he hired me, and it was basically him looking a gift horse in the mouth over and over, with constant renegotiation on the contract they'd both signed initially, with him skimping on alimony and then debating on lesser terms. He was basically given an inch and tried to take a mile, dragging it out for so long that per divorce law it had to go to court. I almost suspect he did so as a way to try and drag her through the mud, though he may have genuinely been that delusional. I consider it a win only because his ex-wife was adamant about only wanting what was somewhat fair, and for it to be over because of the strain it was having on the family. Per the contract, he owed her still about $50K in back pay, but she was content with $15K, which was less than this guy made in a month. I did regret the win, though. She seemed like a very nice woman with the patience of a saint, while almost all of his anger towards her seemed to come from wounded ego. I should also note that though they had 2 kids together, both were in their 20s by the time I was hired, and custody had never been an issue at all, even for the one who had been a minor when they'd separated. It's like in The Hobbit when I guess I'll call him King Dwarf, is like, I can't remember. Wait, is it Thorin? Is it Thorin Oakshield or something like that? God, I can't remember. It's been so long. Those movies are old now. But it's like how he's like, no, the gold is mine. I won't share it with anyone or anything. And greed, man. It can ruin you. I did some custody work early in my career and won some cases, more on the merit of my trial skills than on the merit of the parents. The thing with family law work in general is that there is essentially no bar to entry. Anybody with a law degree and a pulse can get a family law practice up and running quickly because there is just an absolute glut of work. What that also means is that 75% of the lawyers practicing family law are clueless and awful. Early in my career, I certainly was clueless, but at the least, I was not awful. Therefore, in a battle between clueless and awful versus just clueless usually won. So yeah, I can't recall any specific cases, except to say that fighting over children in court is a terrible thing and basically everyone loses. I regret that entire portion of my career.
What? You know what? Just to be safe, thing you did ended up saving your butt later. I was an expediter at a restaurant. It was super busy and I was trying to get runners for food. Was about to send out a stack of dim sum when I looked at the ticket again with a note that said, no peanuts on the tempura tofu. I had read it earlier and didn't sprinkle peanuts on it. Another server was about to run it to the table when I told him to wait and get the actual server for the table. We were slammed and he was kinda mad, but he went and got him anyway. The actual server came back and he's all frustrated when I ask him, does your no peanuts guy not like peanuts or is he allergic to them? He's very allergic to them. That's why I put no peanuts on the ticket. He was all being crappy with me. I told him, well, the frickin' tempura tofu is fried in frickin' peanut oil. Didn't realize the head chef was behind me and heard the whole thing. Server didn't know we only used peanut oil. It was an Asian fusion, really nice upscale restaurant. Needless to say, she, the head chef, frickin' reamed this guy. I was a half second from sending that food out too. Would have been bad. Whew, I mean, in that kind of business, yeah, you gotta be careful with that sort of thing all the time. I mean, when I really think about it, I think it's only been in the last 5 years that I've been consistently asked at every restaurant that I go to, do you have allergies or anything like that? So, it's a good thing that people are looking out for it a lot more. Safety glasses. When working away, it's easy to talk yourself into doing something really quick without them, and there is always a voice in your head yelling at you to put them on. Stopped grinding the thing I was working on, got my glasses, came back, and then this chunk flies up and cracks the right lens. Spidey senses 1, Murphy's Law 0. I knock out my shoes and squeeze the toes for good measure. Hi, Mr. Brown Recluse. Only happened once, but was enough to convince me it was a good habit to have. I've had a handful of these in my life. The one that popped in my head first was from a party when I was 16. It was in a small farm town about 20 to 25 minutes from my actual town, and everyone was partying in somebody's parents' barn and having a real good time. I didn't realize that our designated driver had been drinking all night. When it was time to go, I couldn't even tell she was tipsy, but something wasn't right, so I didn't want to drive back with them for whatever reason. I decided to get the verbal tongue lashing from my mom when she came to pick me up. Well, my friends in the first car were apparently veering across the road, got picked up by the cops, and all of them got to spend the night in jail. Glad I opted for my mom. That is a really crummy move of that designated driver to do. You have a responsibility for your friends if you are the designated driver. That's just a fact. Arrived in San Francisco a week into a trip. As we gather our things during a moment of downtime, I go back to check the bus because, it never hurts. Found my passport, which I had no idea I'd dropped. Was about to put a new load of laundry into my washing machine in the dark. Saw what looked to be a large sock still in the washing machine. Put my hand halfway into the washing machine, then pulled my hand back up and thought, I don't usually leave things in my washing machine. Turned on the light and it was a bat sitting in there. How to get in your house, how to get in your washing machine, but also, did you know that bats actually are one of the biggest carriers of rabies? I only heard that the other day. Whether it's true or not, you tell me. When I was 5 years old, my parents took my sister and me to a planetarium show, and every kid got a souvenir pencil that had the distance of the planets from the sun written on it. Mercury, Venus, Earth, etc. The guy running the planetarium show said something like, hang on to these pencils until 7th grade, kids, and you can use them to cheat on your astronomy tests. He was joking, but I never forgot. And sure enough, it was the exact pencil
skill I used to cheat on the astronomy in 7th grade. I felt smart, but also bad because I didn't feel good about cheating and almost never cheated after that. That is the kind of thing that I think about a lot, just like a little tidbit that someone says that just gets the gears working in your mind. You're like, I will remember this forever. I had a car sitting on jack stands because I needed to do some transmission work. Before climbing under it, I thought it'd be a good idea to rock the car around. One of the jack stands was not in the right spot and the car slipped off it, slamming down on the front disc brakes. Would have killed me. This is from 30 years ago, so some details may be different these days. After enlisting in the army, recruits get a list of everything they must bring to boot camp. On this list was a padlock. During processing the 5 or so days before the real training starts, recruits are given their military equipment, including duffel bags, and told to put their things they brought with them in the duffel bag. After finally getting everything in, I was left with just the padlock. I had no idea what to do with it, but I noticed if I closed my duffel bag in a certain way, I could close the lock on the hook. So when we get to the training unit and off of the cattle trucks and a few hundred drill sergeants are yelling and screaming and telling us to line up, which we do, our duffel bags are in front of us. The drill sergeant then proceeds to check if the bags are locked, and if not, they grab them at the bottom and whirl them around, flinging the entire contents on the ground. Everyone in the entire company had their stuff dumped except for me and the one other guy, only because locking my duffel bag was the only thing I thought of doing. Putting it in my pocket was not an option because they made it very clear that we were not to have any civilian items in our uniform pockets. Saved an email where a lead developer told me to do something stupid. A couple years later, him, now a manager who liked to yell at his subordinates, we were talking about this stupid behavior and he yelled, "Well, why did you do that?" I pulled up his email, clearly instructing me to do just that. He sputtered and walked off speechless. This guy is one of the reasons I still have trust issues with management, even after a string of really competent, caring, trustworthy managers. This is why the archive email button exists. I bought a used Subaru Baja that was 5 years old at the time and had 75k miles for 12k. The salesman offered an extended warranty that covered the engine for 2,500, would last 3 years, 36k miles. That was kind of a lot, and I usually don't buy those. I don't know what got into me that day, but I said, sure. 1 month and 750 miles later, after an oil change at a mechanic shop, oil started shooting into the pistons? I'm not good with cars. Oil went where it wasn't supposed to go is the point. Completely ruined the engine and turbo. The dealer had to keep it for 3 weeks. The warranty company flew someone out to inspect the car and eventually approved a replacement engine, turbo, and any other affected parts. Total repairs cost almost 11k, and the warranty then applied to all the new parts too. Car drove like it was brand new. Later discovered the car had 5 previous owners before me, but I couldn't find any accidents or serious repair history. This is probably the only time buying an extended warranty on something actually worked out in my favor. I bought a really nice tablet a few years ago, a Wacom Intuos Cintiq, essentially a drawing tablet built into a laptop for animation and the like. Sometimes when you buy nice things, they come in nice boxes, and for some reason I don't really want to throw this box away immediately. I put it in the storage area of my basement and forget about it. After only about a month, this $2,500 tablet stopped working. It wasn't dropped or damaged, and I'm still not sure how it broke. It would simply try to boot up and fail, crashing and demanding a restart. I called support, and after several calls and many hours, we were unable to resolve the issue. They said I could send it back and get a new one if it wasn't physically damaged. They told me it needed to be sent back in the original box. I now keep boxes for everything I buy until the warranty expires. I work in IT. When I started working where I do 9 years ago, I noticed that volume shadow copies, VSS, were not turned on the file server. I went ahead and turned it on, and thank God I have never had to pull a tape in the whole 9 years, and I hope to not ever have to. I did not ask for permission to do it because I knew corporate wouldn't let me do it. Space was money back then. The guy at corporate that was over all their servers called and thanked me for doing it because he was also going to do it, and since I did it first, he was allowed to. I have had to use the VSS copies many times, but most recently for our exec VP of quality accidentally deleted her network share with all of our employees' info on them. Thankfully, VSS is on, and it saved my butt as well as hers. I was remodeling my house, took out a loan and had to get the house appraised to get the loan, found that my house was worth $100K more than I had it insured for, raised my limit on the home insurance to $50K more than the appraised value in anticipation of completing renovations. 2 weeks later, house burned to the ground due to a faulty bathroom fan that I did not touch. City insurance company and loan company all sent separate investigators due to how shady it looked. Well, that is simply unfortunate. I'm sorry your hard work went to waste. A couple of years ago, I restarted The Sopranos from season 1. I think it's in the first season where the water heater leaks and floods Tony's basement. So there are these scenes where he's waiting around in a flooded basement. I was imagining what a nightmare that would be. It reminded me that when I bought my house, the inspector told me I would need to replace the water heater within 5 years. I then realized that was like 12 years prior. So I suddenly got nervous. I went and looked at the water heater and it seemed fine, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I also did not have the money to pay to have a new water heater installed. So I decided to go ahead and buy a new water heater and then save up money to pay someone to install it. The water heater arrived and I stored it in the laundry room. Just a few weeks after it arrived, I happened to look at the old water heater and I noticed the catch pan under it had an inch of water in it. It was leaking. Oh no! Emergency. Except wait a minute, I already have a plan for this. So instead of saving up money to hire a plumber, I went to YouTube and learned how to install my own water heater. It all worked out perfectly, all because The Sopranos made me anxious about the condition of my water heater, causing me to randomly purchase a water heater I had no immediate plans to install. I actually coincidentally started watching The Sopranos myself very recently. For the first time, I'm on season 4, and I am enjoying it a lot. When I was 20, I worked at a gas station. They had just changed the law to if the customer looked 40 and under, you had to ID them for cigarettes. I was by myself. Lady came in and ordered a pack of Camels. She looked roughly 45, so I didn't ask. I had this nagging feeling throughout the transaction that it would be a very good idea to ask. So before I took her money, I kinda laughed and said, "Mind if I see your ID real quick?" "I'm real sorry, you're clearly old enough, but they changed the law recently on who we have to ID." She just looked at me and said, "I'm so glad you asked," and flashed her work card at me. She was a frickin' expert. If I didn't ask her, I would have been arrested and fined. That was the day I learned to trust my gut, and I also suck at telling people's ages. She was 35. Went hiking in the middle of the day with a friend and his girlfriend. I brought a flashlight for each of us. Well, the hike took a lot longer than expected, and my buddy's GF sprained her foot at the end. It took us nearly 3 times as long to get back, and it was dark with relatively rocky terrain. Those flashlights saved our bacon. I can't even fathom how long it would have taken to stumble in the dark otherwise. I had originally booked a rental car for a trip to Iceland using my credit card points. 2 days before I cancelled and booked it with my credit card, which provides rental vehicle coverage, because it looked like the weather wasn't going to be great while we were there, and I wanted the extra protection. While there, we got into an accident for which we were not at fault. The car was almost a total loss, and I had to pay up to $12K out of pocket to the company. It took a few months and a ton of paperwork, but the credit card company refunded all of it. I still think about how so lucky it was that I changed the booking. I would have been ruined for a very long time otherwise. I used to be a banner tow pilot and was often asked to fly banners over the New York City area, especially over the Hudson River. I would pick them up at an airport in New Jersey and make my way from there. Typically, if you were to run into some kind of engine problem, you have a fair number of places you could theoretically land if you had the engine trouble. Not so much over the New York City metro area, so I picked out a trail of breadcrumbs, if you will, of specific places I could try to land my plane if I ever had to. On the 1-year anniversary of the Miracle on the Hudson, Captain Sullenberger, etc., I was given the job to fly a banner over a boat on the Hudson that would be carrying the crew and some passengers from the flight. On the way there, my engine failed while I was less than 1,000 feet above the ground, sinking quickly. I needed to find a place to land right away. Fortunately, my best previously selected spot was just to my left, a landfill on Staten Island, and I put the plane right on top of it. This entire topic is basically preparedness is a virtue. My friends and I were always giving crap to another friend because he was never wearing the seatbelt while driving. One night, another friend and him drove me home. It was pretty late and we were all tired. When they dropped me off, I told him, "Use the frickin' seatbelt, you dumb butt." The next day, around lunchtime, I got a call that my two friends got in a car accident. The dumb butt fell asleep while driving my other dumb butt friend's car. They hit a parked car which hit the car in front of it and got stuck into a wall. The parked car acted as a ramp for their car. They flipped over and slid like 20 meters upside down. For some reason, the dumb butt had his seatbelt on for the first time ever and he didn't get injured. Both of them crawled outside the car without a single scratch. If I'm not wrong, my friend in the passenger seat broke his pinky though. Dumb butt learned his lesson and his seatbelt is always on now, even when he's in the passenger seat. My mother's co-worker convinced her to get the best possible insurance when pregnant, because this co-worker had kids deprived of oxygen at birth. She said she could lower it once the kids were 5 and seemed normal. It was a struggle as my parents were both in college and working while raising my brother, so they were looking to cut costs wherever possible. I ended up being born with a birth defect that required a transplant before 5. Before the new doctor even told her what was wrong, after rushing me away via ambulance, they asked her if she had insurance. She was able to say yes. Gold star, platinum, whatever. Many kids died even with the top-class care I received, so I surely wouldn't have made it without it. I'm turning 30 next year. Thanks, random lady I've never met. Saved a receipt from my dentist. They charged me, then delayed the procedure I paid for. When I asked for a refund, they changed my entire bill and told me I owed them another $300 when all they actually did was a cleaning and x-rays. I submitted both copies of the invoice to my dental insurance company and told them what happened. 3 weeks later, the insurance company, Delta Dental, resolved the issue with the dentist and I got a refund. Despite the dentist attempting to defraud me, they still regularly call me asking me to come back in. Recently, they changed their name and moved a block down the road to try and hide from the plethora of negative reviews on Yelp. I should really go for a dental checkup soon, actually, now that I think about it. Very minor, but once I was going out drinking in San Francisco with some friends. We loved going to this kind of dive bar in the Tenderloin, rough neighborhood. Anyway, I had just bought a new car and was worried about parking in the Tenderloin. All my friends assured me it'd probably be fine. As we parked on the street about 2 blocks from the bar, a homeless guy came up to me and said, "Man, you don't want to park that new crap here. Somebody gonna smash them windows and steal your stereo, your sunglasses." On a whim, I just said, "Yeah, but we're kinda late. Want to keep an eye on it for me?" He pauses for a second, goes, "Like a sanctuary guard?" "Yeah, man, I'll watch your car. You got $10? My friends, confused, started mumbling about just walking on, but I thought it couldn't hurt so much, so I gave the guy $10. "Here's your $10. Keep an eye on it, man. If it's still in good shape when I get back, I'll give you another $10. Damn, $20? All I gotta do is sit here? And make sure nobody frickin' smashes my window. There isn't anything inside anyway. It's new. I got you, man, I got you." He took a huge swig of this bottle of wild turkey and we were on our way. Anyway, the night progresses. We drink and have a good time, and now we're all proper drunk except for my friend Mary, who was our designated driver. I gave her my keys and we start walking down the block. One by one, we notice almost every parking spot has shattered glass next to it. Somebody went through the area and smashed each window to get into the cars. I get this sinking feeling in my stomach. I'm already mentally prepared to have to shell out a few $100 to replace the window of a car that wasn't even mine a week ago. But lo and behold, we get to the spot and my car is fine, and the homeless guy is bundled up in a sleeping bag, and he sees me and goes, "Hey, you're back. You won't believe what crap I did for you. Check this out." And he shows me this huge frickin' bruise on his face and pulls his gloves and shows me his knuckles, which are scraped to hell. "What happened?" I said. "Some bunch of expletives. He comes around here smashing windows and grabbing crap. He gets to your car," and I'm like, "Yo, pass that one. That crap's my responsibility." And he turned around, pulled back on this big old brick he's got in his hands, and I jumped that mother from behind and he hit me in the head with his goddamn brick. But I knocked him good, man. I changed that mother's mind, man. He was all strung out and he ran off down the block. My friends and I are staring at this guy incredulously. My car is fine, spotless. I reach into my pocket for $10, but I realize I don't have cash. "Dude, thanks so much. Give me a second. I gotta get your cash," I say as I walk into the liquor store on the corner, use the ATM. As I'm checking out, I realize they've got 750s of wild turkey in there for like $10. I buy one for him. I give him the $10 and the bottle. "Thanks for keeping an eye on the car for me. You would have thought this dude just won the lottery. Oh, damn, he just kept screaming. Then he kicked the pile of blankets and crap on the side, and I realized he had a girl in there sleeping. And he goes, "Wake your butt up, look what I got." And she rubs her eyes and looks confused at us, then at him and at the bottle and then at us. Wordlessly, she reaches for the bottle as he hands it to her, and he's still screaming and hollering like it's the best day of his life. You gave that man a sworn duty, and he carried it out, I guess. Very simple, but a roll of toilet paper in the glove compartment of my car has literally saved my butt multiple times. A tropical storm was blowing through my city a few months ago, and we were projected to get some winds, gusts, and significant rain. Because our parking lot isn't large enough for all staff and our clients, a lot of us have to park on the street, which is lined with large old trees. As I rolled up on the morning, we were due to get the storm. I parked in my usual spot down the block. Before I shut the car off, though, I noticed that this particular spot was located directly across the street from one of the largest trees on the block. Thinking, you know what, just to be safe, I put the car in reverse and backed up about 10 feet, safely out of the direct line of fire from any trees. In the middle of that afternoon, in the midst of the howling wind and driving rain, we heard a huge thud down the street. Went to investigate, and that same tree I'd been parked across the street from fell across the road and missed my car by about 8 feet. At that moment, I was glad that I decided to play it safe. The car parked on the other side of the street directly across from where I'd initially been got absolutely destroyed. Crushed roof, windows blown out, just pulverized. One day I got hit in the head while surfing. It turned out to be a concussion, and I went to the hospital with my mum. I was 17 at the time. We met with the doctor in A&E, and he said, "It's a concussion. We can do a CT scan if you want, but there's probably no need." I was unsure and just said, "Yeah, I would like a scan." After the scan was done, I was told that they didn't see anything, but the radiographer would be checking it in the morning. Next day, I got a call to be told that I needed an MRI, that they had found a tumor in my brain. If they didn't catch it there, I would have lost my vision from the tumor, and it would have been too late to do anything at that stage. Hey, if you're at the doctor's, why not just ask for the whole shebang? Well, unless you're in America. I stayed up late one night playing video games, but I left an unfinished can of soda out overnight. When I woke up the next morning, I picked it up, held it about an inch away from my mouth, and was about to drink it. Then I thought, wait a minute, I don't want this hot AF soda. So I walked over to the sink to pour out what was left. As I poured it, a huge cockroach crawled out of the hole of the top. I promptly high-fived myself. People who are the reason for certain rules. What is your story? Former co-workers of mine. Contracted employees have a maximum amount of time that they can work each week. Company pushed a lot of 60-plus-year-old employees into retirement via a benefits change. A bunch of those who retired re-signed on as contracted hourly workers and started making more money than they had before they retired. Checking IDEA work when we have parties that contain alcohol used to be an honor system until a newly hired person under 21 drank too much and vomited in the hallway. Screw the honor system, my liver needs alcohol. Hey, you're ruining it for the rest of us! They banned doing handstands at my primary school because we used to play the game where you'd sing a song and go up into a handstand, and when I went up, for some reason, my arm just gave way and I landed on my shoulder and broke my collarbone. I saw my old teacher a few weeks ago, and apparently that's the handstand story equivalent of the boy who swung back on his chair and cracked his head open. Oh god, that reminds me of how in primary school I used to swing back and forth on my chair until one day one of my best friends at the time actually cracked his head open on the corner of a table behind him, and he left a big old pool of blood there. It was awful. There was also a guy who slipped on a banana peel, legitimately slipped on a freaking banana peel and fell down stone steps, and they had to get paramedics in or something. When I was going into 6th grade, my family was moving to a new town. In order to prevent myself and my brother from having to go through the hassle of moving and to alleviate some of their stress, my parents decided to send us to sleepaway camp for 6 weeks. My brother, 2 years older, proceeded to get extremely sick within the first week or so that we were at camp. He was on bed rest, and at more than one point, the staff had to bring him into the small town nearby to go to the hospital. My mother had a tendency to overreact and make mountains over molehills. She was extremely unhappy with the staff and thought it was outrageous that my brother got that sick that quickly, assuming that someone must have showed up to camp on the first day knowing they were sick and spread the germ to my brother. Luckily, he recovered after the first week and was able to enjoy the rest of the summer. When the term was over, we left camp excited to see our new house and meet the people at our new school. Fast forward to the next summer, our parents saw how much we enjoyed camp and decided that having us out of the house for a month wasn't so bad for themselves either. Instead of driving us this summer, they decided to send us on the buses the camp ran to different counties and states. The total ride was about 4 hours, an eternity for a middle schooler with a surplus of energy. Once we arrived at the camp, the buses all line up and there's an in-process tent set up where all the kids had to walk through before they could get their bags and go to their cabins. It was taking forever. I started to get irritated. I had waited all year for this, now I have to wait more. I finally get off the bus and into the tent and see what they're doing. Each camper is getting asked a series of questions about their current health. Are they feeling sick? Do they have any allergies? Do they have any prescriptions, etc.? They would then get their temperature taken by the nurse to confirm they did not have a fever and were sent with a counselor to their cabin. I got to the end of the line and asked the nurse why they're doing all of this because it is taking so long and I was being an impatient child. Her response, parent was very upset last summer that their camper got sick, so now we are screening everyone and quarantining them if they show any signs of symptoms of being ill. I look at my brother who is standing behind me and yelled, "Thanks a lot!" In 3rd grade, I jumped off a very tall piece of playground equipment, smacked my chin on my knee and bit my tongue. It was a bloodbath, and the teacher passed out and hit her head off of the pavement, resulting in another bloodbath. Well, the next morning, there was an announcement stating no more jumping off the tower on the playground. The next day, the teacher's son tried jumping off of a rope swing over the schoolyard fence and broke both of his arms. The school removed all of the fun stuff off the playground that summer. I can only imagine they were probably the most hated people on the playground for a little while after that. At my school, it was a rule to not act like a ninja. When I was young, I got interested in Naruto, so I started acting like a ninja. 3 people saw me and started acting like ninjas as well. The teacher noticed, so she told us to stop. We stopped for the day, but the next day we did it again. Our teacher was getting annoyed, so she gave us a bad star, a red star that meant you were bad. At the end of the week, you had to take the bad star home for your parents to see. We got mad at the teacher, so when she wasn't looking, one of the ninjas stood up and walked slowly. He plopped the red stars from each of the ninja's star sheets. Teacher noticed and had enough. She sent us to the principal's office. He was laughing but told us to stop. Next day, there was a rule. Don't act like ninjas. Bunch of goddamn uppity ninjas. So at my high school, there was a rule that was added my junior year and is even in bold in the student parent handbook. This rule was that students are not allowed off campus during the 10-minute passing period at all. The reason that this rule exists is that my sophomore year, I was really craving a Starbucks during my first period, so in the last few minutes of the period, I mobile ordered a coffee and then during break ran half a mile to pick up my coffee and walk back. I made it back to my class on time, but the school still tried to get me in trouble until I said, "Show me where it says I can't leave campus during the passing period in the handbook and I will accept any punishment. Otherwise, you have no grounds to punish me." And after 20 minutes of sitting in the office, I got out with no punishment. Then my junior year, that rule was added to the handbook. To this day, it's one of my worst accomplishments. I'm just waiting for that person to be like, "I'm the reason that they locked Newgrounds or Miniclip or Armored Games from the school computers." I moved from the Midwest to Texas to attend college. It was the first time I tasted deep-fried okra. The cafeteria was all you could eat. The okra was like sniff to me, and I ate plateful after plateful. Pretty soon, the rule was 2 servings per meal. I got Beyblades banned in 4th grade, circa like 2002. My mom had cheaped out and bought me an off-brand Beyblade that was heavier and I think made out of metal or something dense. Anyways, we had this one kid who would bring in like the Battle Dome or whatever they had. My Beyblade would collide with theirs and theirs would just go flying out of the dome at unsuspecting victims. Picking up speed, running out of time, going head to head, it's a way of life, you gotta fall down, eat ground to get back up again. Let's Beyblade! I adored Beyblade as a kid. The anime, the Beyblades themselves, they were so cool. I thought it was the best fad to come out at that time in schools and stuff. Yeah, there was the hazards and everything, but it was cooler than frickin' Yu-Gi-Oh!, which I have fallen so frickin' far off from. I don't even know what's going on in that anymore. I also remember Battle Beat-A-Man, which I really liked and I even bought, but like no one gave a crap about Battle Beat-A-Man. Does anyone even frickin' remember Battle Beat-A-Man? Back in the day on Neopets, there was this rule that you couldn't make posts titled things like Girls Only Party, but the rule was never enforced. So one day when I was 12, and on my mother's Neopets account since I was too young to use the Neo boards, I made one of these boards, and everything was fine for the first 10 to 15 pages. Everyone was staying within the rules on the rule-breaking post, so So TNT, the Neopets team, basically the mods and developers and stuff, left us alone. And then someone decided to RP going swimming, which was kind of risky and I warned against it. Shortly thereafter, someone made a post that was pretty similar to the following. Oh, okay. Gets out of water, bikini falls off. Oops. The board was instantly deleted. My mother's account was permanently frozen, and from that day forward, when someone used the word bikini on the Neo boards, a filter changed the word to cardigan. When I worked at Whole Foods in the prepared food section, I used to make myself a burrito for dinner. I would load that mother as full with beans, rice, and meat as possible. I usually ended up with something that was about the size of a fat baby's arm. Yeah, that all came to a stop when one of the storage managers saw me making my own burrito. After that, we would get written up if they caught us making our own food like burritos and whatnot. My freshman year of college, I made it so that no one in not just my dorm, but all dorms on campus were allowed to use the microwave located in each of the dorm's common area after 10 p.m. because drunk but me went to microwave a Hot Pocket one night and instead of setting the timer to 3 minutes, I set it to 30, which wouldn't have been a problem if I stayed there waiting for it, but drunk but me decided at that moment, hey, you know what would be even better than being drunk? Being drunk and high, and proceeded to go back to my room for a bong hit, which turned into several, which turned into me nearly passing out, roused only by the now blaring fire alarm that made everyone else in the dorm to also have to go outside in the middle of the goddamn night. And of course, due to the whole where there's smoke, there's fire rule, a couple of fire trucks showed up to the action. Me and everyone else that I lived in this dorm with were all standing outside grumbling about what butthole caused this, some speculating that someone was stupid enough to have pulled a false alarm. At a certain point amongst that grumbling did it dawn on me that I just left that Hot Pocket in the microwave, and that's when I started worrying that the sort of all this 3 a.m. hubbub could have been me, a deep, abiding shame that was validated when I saw one of the firefighters emerge from the dorm with a charred microwave. I joined in the chorus of incredulousness from the other cohabitants of my dorm who were shouting pleas of what drunken, dumb butt burn up the microwave, and whoever did this is gonna get their butt beat, and similar witticisms. I figured at this point lying was my only way out, and in the end it worked. No one that night ever found out it was me who burned up the microwave in my drunken and stoned state of dishevelment and was the source of the no microwaves after 10 rule in the dorms that was enforced for the rest of the time I was in school, and could still be in place for all I know. My fourth high school now has a rule that teachers have to actually check in with the office before allowing a student into your class, even if you know them. My mom gave up on me going to high school because she didn't graduate, and neither did my grandma. No one on my dad's side graduated either, pulled me out of school. I moved across the state and started going to my old school again, and the teachers didn't check in on if I was supposed to be there. I still hated going to classes, but needed the testing so I could get credits, so I would ask my friends who had the same classes to tell me when their tests were, and would sit in the cafeteria for both lunch sections. It took them a few months to figure it out. Our gym where we had prep rallies was a level lower than most of the school, so there was an elevator so disabled people could get there. A few of my buddies and I would take the elevator back up with one of my best friends who was in a wheelchair because we would sit with him during the rallies and walk back to class with him and chat in the elevator. One day, a assistant principal saw us get out with him and lost his mind because he thought we were using the elevator being lazy. They put up a sign next week saying to leave the elevator for people who need it. My buddy who was in the wheelchair and his dad sent several angry emails about it because it essentially segregated him from his friends. They took the sign down pretty soon after that. I guess that counts, but it was very brief enforcement of a rule. Don't know if this counts, but a guy in my school was the reason for the boys' bathroom being locked in between breaks because they poured washing powder and detergent down the toilet, then flushing, causing a foam party. If anyone needed the bathroom, we had to go to the office and fill out a form and then get a key. It lasted about 2 weeks until the teachers and most of our senior students kicked up a fit about it because it was taking about 10 minutes out of your class time if you needed to go, rather than the 2 minutes it used to take. Plus, the girls' bathroom was still open, so it became an equality issue and they got unlocked again. While working at McDonald's when I was younger, I thought it would be cool to make a quesadilla with what was in the kitchen. It turned out really well, but my manager ratted me to the GM, and the next day there was a sign in the kitchen stating that only items on the menu were to be made by cooks. When I was a freshman in college, I brewed beer in my dorm room. I got caught and written up, but it was before I added the yeast, so my defense was that I did not have alcohol in the dorm and was just landing to bring the mixture to a 21-year-old friend off campus prior to adding the yeast. It was a private university and they called bullcrap, but the penalty was just a slap on the wrist, and they changed the residency code to specifically prohibit fermenting yeast. That's not a bad defense, to be honest, but it obviously didn't work, and at least the punishment was, like they said, just a slap on the wrist. I wasn't the reason for the rule, but I was the one who implemented it. I was the network admin at a middle school back when mice balls was still a thing. Some of the kids were regularly stealing the balls out of the mice and taking them with them, so we'd have to replace the mice out of our meager spares. Because of that, I implemented the policy that all mice were to be turned upside down at the end of class, and the teacher was to walk around and visually inspect each mouse to ensure the ball was still in place. Ended the problem right there. During my junior year, my physics teacher did the mousetrap car assignment and held a competition to see who could make a mousetrap car go the farthest and fastest. I spent the whole night before making it. The next day, I did a test run right before the testing, and my rear axle snapped in half, basically ensuring that my mousetrap car was not going to move. Anyway, the teacher assigned 50 points for having your mousetrap car there and 50 points if it moved. He gave each student at least 3 attempts to get his mousetrap car to move. Everyone in my class got theirs to move, and I knew mine was basically fricked. We were doing these runs in the hallways, and I was so glad that no one came out to see how mine will do. When it came to my turn, I set up my mousetrap car and let it go. The car was barely moving, and I was losing my mind due to how fricked I thought it was. My teacher had to come closer, get on his knees, and see that the car is actually slowly moving. Confused students came out due to my celebration and howling only to see the mousetrap car at my knees. I got full credits for that assignment. The physics teacher did the assignment again my senior year, and I saw that he changed it so that your mousetrap car had to go at least 1 foot to get those points. Maybe there were other students that were reasons for it, but as of my knowledge, the teacher had me in mind. I went to a Catholic school that had a strict uniform policy. I'm the oldest of 4. This will be important later. For Halloween, seniors are allowed to dress up while the underclassmen wear uniforms. Well, I went to Catholic school from kindergarten to 12th grade and always wore a uniform. My senior year, I came into school on Halloween with a shirt and jeans on. When asked what I was, I replied, a public school student. Next year, my brother was a senior, and when the list of unacceptable costumes came up, public school student was on it. My youngest brother graduated in 2016, and it's still on the handout. So back in the day, there was an electronics store known as Circuit City. The attire was pretty simple: red polo shirt, black or khaki pants, and black shoes. Around this time, Heelys became popular, and I decided that I needed a pair of those loafers. I got mine in black and wore them shift after shift, scooting around the store and messing with customers as I silently glided between aisles and snuck up behind them. On my last day, I may have decided to have a few beers before work and figured I would put in a few hours, get my check and bail. I also may have decided that running in said Heelys to chase after a soon-to-be former co-worker was a fantastic idea, and subsequently tripped, which resulted in me flying into a yellow concrete pole. This resulted in me hitting the pole with the palm of my hand, think Superman but more idiotic and with poor posture, and breaking my arm. After getting a fancy cast, I filed workers' compensation because, why the heck not? After getting approved, since there was nothing defining whether or not the black shoes were supposed to be wheel-free, Circuit City promptly amended the handbook and stated that flat black bottomed shoes were the only acceptable kind. A year later, they went under, and I still have my Heelys. Even as an adult, I still catch myself being slightly jealous of kids with Heelys, because I'm like, I'm too old to wear Heelys, but I guess not. But also, I wish I had Heelys when I was a kid. Uni rolled out monthly internet traffic quotas because several students reportedly downloaded what at the time in history were inordinately excessive amounts of data. This was almost 20 years ago. My group of friends knew some people who worked in the uni's IT management department, so a few days after that was announced, we go by their office to head off for movie night, and I noticed a sheet of paper with a list of student numbers and associated traffic volumes posted on the team billboard. My student number is sitting right at the very top. The reason why it called my attention, comfortably sporting over 5 gigabytes of traffic, 5 times and 10 times the amount for the second and third students on the list. This was during the time where private cable internet had access to 640 kilobytes and institutions like universities had T1 connections, 1.5-ish megabytes. I asked what that was. Oh, that That is why we're rolling out monthly internet quotas. That's the list of top 30 students who downloaded the most data, and next to them is how much they downloaded last month alone. Why do you ask? Do you know who some of these people are? I told them I didn't know about any of the others, but the one at the top was mine. The look on their faces was a mix of fascination and shock. And for the rest of the night, I had to listen to them ask me several times how had I managed to do that consistently for the last few months. A bit of background. Uni IT, being unable to guarantee that computers would be clean enough in the long run, had to put in place an OS image download that all computers would grab and reset themselves to. Imagine Windows 10 disk restore functionality, but in the late 90s and early 2000s. During a lot of project nights, labs were open 24/7 to students. We would end up eventually losing focus, which would quickly turn into playtime. Usually something like Q3 or Freelancer, as the computers were always tabula rasa on reboot. We were always asked to shut them down, and they themselves would do so if not logged into after a while. We ended up having to install it all again. We had enough disk copies. This was also the time I quite literally downloaded all that Game Hippo had to offer to try on campus computers, as well as repeat downloads of Stepmania, DDR, Beatmania for PC freeware, tons of songs, and the real clincher, accompanying high-quality videos that would play during gameplay. So yeah, I basically did it on repeat downloads. The funny thing about it is that when the limit came into play, students had to basically authenticate themselves with the uni proxy via basic authentication on browser. Every time someone expired their quota, the system would simply prompt you for authentication again, and thus my friends and I started using the account pool notion. You ran out of allowance? Here, use my account. Whole different can of worms. My senior year of high school, 2004, the powers that be decided we had to work on a year-long project of our choice. At the end of the year, we had to give a presentation on our project. The rules given to us for appropriate attire clearly stated students must wear either a dress, skirt, or a tie and collared shirt with slacks. Being a girl who really hated dresses and skirts, I decided to be smart and wear a tie, collared shirt, and slacks. Nobody argued with me, but the next year the rule stated boys wear a tie and slacks and girls wear skirts or dresses. Yes, it was sexist. No, I wasn't protesting the sexism, I just wanted to wear pants all day for a 15-minute presentation. Nothing wrong with that if you ask me. So I've got two stories for this. One is in 6th grade and the other is in 9th grade. When I was in 6th grade, we used to shoot paper at our teacher with those little rubber band hair ties, whatever bracelet things. After a few months, the principal got tired of hearing the teachers complain that the kids were shooting paper at them. We did it in class, at recess, at lunch, on the bus, wherever we could. That Christmas, my mom bought me a big box of that stuff, so I showed up to school with the bag full of it and sold it to the kids. They got caught every time but never ratted me out. I just kept bringing it in and let them shoot it. We got in so much trouble for it now they will suspend anyone for just having a rubber band. When I was in 9th grade, we had a prep rally assemble and the Spirit Week theme for that day was class colors. My grade decorated our entire building with glitter all over the floor and walls, tables, chairs, desks. It was everywhere. 2 years later, they're still trying to clean it up. They banned glitter for the entire school. Nobody is allowed to use it because a few cheerleaders and student council went insane. I walked out of my second hour and it looked like a unicorn threw up.
Zookeepers. What animals do you most enjoy taking care of and which are the worst? I did a behind-the-scenes article on a zoo once and spent time with zookeepers and vets. A really chilled conversation trust in Jersey, Channel Islands. The lemurs were not kept in cages because they needed space to roam from tree to tree. The zoo figured out that they had their area that was home, but they were free to leave any time they wanted. There was nothing to stop them wandering off. They didn't leave. They were happy there, apart from the father of the group who would, about once a month, decide he needed a break from the family and head over about 400 yards down the road to the pub. They would get a call from the pub saying that the furry little guy is hanging out in their garden again. Most of the time, he'd just wander back. People and animals truly are more alike than we think. It sounds like a regular English dad wandering down to the pub to take a break. My sister is a zookeeper. We asked her and her keeper friends which animal they would least like to be trapped in a room with. They all immediately, unanimously agreed on one animal, chimp. As one keeper put it, if a lion gets out of a cage, I would run and help the public and other keepers. If a chimp got out of its cage, I would run to my car and drive away. I did animal control for almost a decade. Wasn't afraid of nothing, except chimps. I became a scared little girl when we got a loose chimp call. I don't blame anyone for being afraid of chimps. I mean, I'm pretty sure I heard they're
recently there's been sightings that chimps use, sharpened sticks now? Yeah, I'd be scared too. I worked at a museum that kept a large turkey vulture tethered to a perch in the center of an animal room. Children would tease this poor bird mercilessly despite the many signs and warnings. The bird sat in stoic silence. But almost once a day, at the perfect moment, he would hop down as one of the little chumps walked off, and he'd grab them with his huge bill just above the belt line by their pasty, fat, little French fry-infused love handles, clamp down hard, and then snap it back. Imagine someone grabbing you by the soft parts with a pair of channel lock pliers. Their scream in the nasty welt was always the same. By the time parents, teachers, and staff arrived, he would always be back on the perch, just staring still stoic. Best part of that job. I fed one of the sloths while volunteering behind the scenes at a zoo for a service organization, and it fell asleep halfway through chewing a pear slice. Then it woke up a minute later and finished it. It was definitely a cute animal. I volunteer weekly at a rescue center for birds of prey. I avoid the bald eagles unless absolutely necessary, even our resident birds, which are non-releasable and some of whom have been in our care for their entire lives, are the worst. They are scared of everything and very finicky. We spent 6 weeks last summer adjusting one to a cart. It wasn't just when it rolled by. He couldn't stand any of the new carts just sitting there across from him. We used a grant to update supplies, including 8 new great collapsible rolling carts. We use them a lot, especially when we take birds off site. Apparently, a bird thinks your product is a rolling death machine, and that is sadly not a suitable reason to return something. Other things bald eagles hate: water horses being carried or unraveled, the sound of rakes on gravel, buckets up until 5 gallons, those are fine, plastic bags, unfolding newspapers, shoelaces, key rings with 6 to 15 keys under and over seems to be okay. Birds I love. Peregrine falcons are straight up baller. Maybe we just have some amazing ones, but damn if these guys aren't the greatest. Nothing spooks them, not overly aggressive, and tolerate a lot, especially during camp season. Also incredibly smart. They learn routines very well and seem to be very perceptive. We try and train all resident birds for their safety and for our own. For example, most of our animals have to go to a specific perch and display a desired set of behavior, equivalent to sitting quietly before we drop food off. By far, these guys are the fastest to pick this up and other behaviors usually, and the best at complying. Barn owls. We don't get too many and only have 2 resident birds, but I love these guys. Very quiet and pretty tidy compared to others who destroy everything. Bald eagle. Here's a bonus. Cheetahs are the most disgusting of all the big cats. They destroy everything in their enclosures and will sit and roll around in their own mess. Zebras are douchebags. I have actually also heard that zebras have really awful attitudes. I work at a safari park and we have a bat cave. They're all Egyptian fruit bats in there, and for the most part they're perfectly fine around humans, bar a little anxious if I try to get too close to them while they're sleeping. One bat, however, is a right pain in my butt. His name is Clayton, and he's constantly hanging on the exit, which means I have to get him off it so people can leave safely. Unlike all his fellow bats, he doesn't fly away the moment I get too close to him. Instead, I have to literally poke him until he does go away. Yesterday, he was chilling in his usual spot by the exit while eating a piece of pear. I poke him to get off and move as usual, and the little poo squeaks at me, which is bat for sod off. Frickin' Clayton, man. I'm a zookeeper in Colorado. It's hard to pick favorites because I really enjoy working with so many species, but I'll tell you about a few. African black-footed penguins are adorable and all have their own personalities, so they're really fun to work with. Most of the unpaired females are also very affectionate towards their keepers, and it's always the best when they follow you around and flirt. North American river otters are also one of my favorites. They're cute, smart, and really interactive. They play with most of the things we give them and recognize us when we call or are standing outside the exhibit. One of our older females will swim next to you at the exhibit glass and follow and chase you if you move around. Some bears are hilarious and also really smart. They like to climb around and will figure out where food is no matter where you put it. Every morning, I walk up to their holding and greet our male by blowing gently in his face. That's how they say hello. Ring-tailed lemurs have great personalities and have the added bonus of being adorable. They will also follow you around and sit next to you when we're weeding their exhibit. When I have treats, they will hold your finger and ask nicely to get one. We had one young male who had no concern for personal space and would hold my shoulder, tapping on my arm and trying to pry open my hand for treats if I was sitting down. They also make the cutest noises of any animals ever, in my opinion, and they are always cuddling with each other. I can't really think of any animals I hate taking care of, but if I have to choose, squirrel monkeys are really gross. They poop everywhere, propping walls, ceilings, and super grabby. I've had my hair pulled a few times, but luckily they're small enough to not cause the kind of damage an ape or larger primate could. They're still fun animals though, and I'm happy to work with them. I worked at a marine rehabilitation center in Costa Rica for a year. The sharks were cool dudes. Worst they would do is grab the feeder stick and not let go, which makes it really hard to keep feeding them, but you can't really negotiate with them. The caiman were alright, but I never did find a way to hang the meat piñatas that didn't break the rope or break the tree branches over the enclosure, which was frustrating to me and the caiman. The sloths are not bad, but they can move very fast if you make them angry. Those claws will open you up something fierce, like down to the bone. It didn't happen to me, but I watched it happen to another employee. The males will fight each other given the chance, and holding and touching them is so very uncomfortable because they are literally just flesh bags of skin and bone. But the sea turtles were the biggest jerks you could ever imagine. Let me share some stories with you. Our turtles were lazy, spoiled pricks. You had to drop the food directly into their mouths and try to avoid getting bitten, or else they would let it fall to the bottom of the tank, at which point you had to walk back into the building and get a net to scoop the food and try to feed them again. They would not die for it. We had one turtle in a 90,000-gallon tank. You could imagine it would need to be cleaned, and the only way to do it was with a snorkel. Our turtle, Mario Fernando, would swim up and bite my butt for fun while I was cleaning the tank. This species of turtle have beaks, and a bite to the butt hurts like a mother. Plus, it required medical attention from the town doctor that laughed like crazy and took pictures of my turtle-chewed butt for his friends and Facebook. No, Costa Rica does not abide by IDOWorkHereLady laws. So I would have to attempt to clean the glass on the tank and always watch for that little prick to be sure he wasn't anywhere near me. He would also float and play dead all the time to lure me into checking on him, then, you guessed it, bite my butt. But the worst turtle we had was Shenanda. Shenanda lived in a big round tank outside that would get filthy. They are filthy creatures. The tank had a big PCV drain in the bottom that stuck up about 3 inches higher than the bottom of the tank, and the only way to clean the tank was to drain all the water out and then use a push broom to shove the gunk and poop down the drain. Shenanda thought the tank cleaning day was her day to get revenge for everything that had ever gone wrong in her life thanks to humans. So the first time I got told to clean her tank, my co-workers hand me thigh-high plastic waders and the broom and show me how to begin draining the tank, then head to lunch. I set all this in motion, and when the water is low enough, I hop into the below-ground tank with Shenanda, but I notice she is swimming around the drain a lot. Whatever, I let her do her and start scrubbing the tank's walls. Eventually, the water gets low enough that it is almost falling below the drain when I hear a suction noise. Shenanda has allowed herself to be suctioned to the top of the PVC drain, and she is giving me the stink eye and flapping her flippers like she's upset that she's stuck. So now I am standing in ankle-deep turtle poop in plastic boots in the Costa Rica sun, sweating to death and trying to figure out how to safely, without getting bit, move a 150-pound plus snapping sea turtle off this drain so I can finish cleaning her tank. Everyone that could help me move her is at lunch. I am pretty much alone in the park except for the admin and office people, and no way are they climbing in to help me. Worst of all, I realized I had forgotten my ladder, so I couldn't even get myself out of the tank to get help and find shade or do something about the situation. You might be thinking this is a one-off thing, but it wasn't. Shenanda would suction her butt to the drain every single time I cleaned that tank for the year I worked there. She knew exactly what she was doing. Also, birds of prey smells terrible, like musty death. Well, I kinda don't blame Shenanda for feeling that way when you gave her that name, and it basically is close enough to shenanigans. Welcome to Shenanda's Shenanigans! Not a keeper, but I was an intern at the zoo for several years. Some of my favorite animals to work with were the polar bears, the rhino, and the big cats. The bears and cats were just staggeringly awesome. Big, beautiful creatures I'd only seen in movies and pictures before, not 15 feet from me. It always took my breath away to be that close and care for those sorts of animals. The rhino was just a big old goofy guy. He played fetch, he ran up to you for treats and scratches, and honestly was pretty similar to a dog. That rhino could always put a smile on my face. Least favorite? The birds and greater apes. The birds were mean, loud, and smelly. I have scars on my knee from penguin bites because I wasn't feeding them fast enough. They just crap everywhere, and you get to scrub it off the rocks for hours. I know that it's part of the deal with being an intern, but it made me pretty much hate those birds. The greater apes, aside from the orangutans, just scared me. They're smart, stronger than us, but lack the compassion and humanity we have, and you know it when you work with them. If there was ever an animal I was truly afraid of, it was the chimps. I flat out refused to work with the mandrills after the first day. That being said, the chimps bonded incredibly well with their actual keepers, and more than once came to keepers for comfort. At one point, our male chimp got out, was stuck in a tree, and his keeper went out and held hands with him while leading him back to the enclosure. That poor man had to take 2 weeks to mourn when that chimp passed away a few years ago. They were really close. Volunteered at a zoo for a few years. The giraffes were the easiest cleanup, except for rainy days. The lemurs were sweet and you could feed them by hand, either by putting food in their faces or in their little hands. The barnyard animals were fine, although the sheep would walk uphill from me and boo at me like Welsh nightclub goers. The camels would chill. No, they don't spit. The ones there never spit. I was told that when you beat them or terrorize them, they will vomit on you, and that's what's called spit. These guys never had a bad day. The worst was an elephant with PTSD. She tried to murder several keepers and would throw rocks at them while I observed her and her crew. I'd hold a clipboard and do observation. The chimps were the most dysfunctional family I'd ever seen, and I grew up in Mafia, Brooklyn. They had a bobcat who spent his days napping. I liked him and noticed the keeper had no problem going in the cage and tidying up around his sleeping form. He'd get up for chow and to play with some toys and then go back to sleep. Not a zookeeper, but when I was in high school, the seagulls would attack people during lunch. Our school was like a small college campus. They would fly by in the hundreds from the middle school a few miles away because we were disgusting and left trash everywhere. They knew when our lunch period was and came every day. At first, we tolerated them, and they would generally avoid people, but then they weren't afraid of us anymore, and were more of a cleanup crew. After a year of this, they began to harass people for food, so we fought back, swinging our sweaters and backpacks at them. No one ever got one. And for some time, there was this sort of Cold War where the birds would just watch us eat and surround the schools, but would never come down until everyone was back in class. Human and bird relations were finally broken when they carpet-bombed the entire school, Pearl Harbor style. Feces rained down on people as they ran for what little cover there was. My friends and I watched in horror from one of the few places that had cover as people became peppered with white shot. The bathrooms were jammed with people lining up to clean themselves while others left entirely. We didn't go outside for weeks until the horde moved on. Didn't really fit the criteria, but it was funny nonetheless, I can give it that. A wallaby named Wallace is my favorite animal in the world. Don't tell my girlfriend, but I like him more than our dog. He likes only me out of the 4 or 5 handlers he encounters. The birds are the worst. They've become aggressive with the staff since a particularly combative bird joined the big exhibit area. It's like they've learned that the other keepers and I pose zero threat. I got a few scrapes trying to get away from some flamingos a couple days ago. It's frowned upon to fight back against the animals, even if it's only restraining an attack. I've heard stories of keepers getting fired for doing so. I actually had to omit some of that stuff because this person was just talking about things that, just was not necessary, like things with his girlfriend. It's like, where's this coming from? I just want to hear more about Wallace the Wallaby. Not a zookeeper, but I once helped take care of elephants at a summer camp in Florida. We made toys for them, which mostly included giant leaf balls covered in peanut butter and assorted nuts and fruit. Watch elephants scramble around it, frantically licking the ball as it rolled around in the dirt, was quite an experience and had to be one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Love those big beasts. I interned at a zoo last summer as a vet tech and a keeper. I was able to work with the kangaroos, wolves, coyotes, eagles, Andean condors, as well as the farm and education animals. One afternoon, another intern and I went to go clean and feed the condors' enclosure. These birds are like 3-foot-tall vultures with a decent-sized wingspan. In order for us to go in, we need to get the male into his indoor enclosure because he can get aggressive. However, the female is quite tame. This task alone can be hit or miss, depending on how he feels. He is pretty smart, so we have to open it up and sit on the other side, enticing him with some raw meat or fish while calling him in. He will slowly walk in front of the indoor enclosure, eyeing us and the meat. Some days he will perch on a big rock that's sitting directly in front of the indoor enclosure, knowing there is food there, but still ignoring us. Luckily, this particular day he decides to come in and we close him off. Then we head in to clean the outside exhibit, grabbing our tools and trays of meat. As we're finishing up, the female condor decides to accompany us to the door. While we're exiting, she then finds my co-worker's phone in her back pocket to be very interesting. She then latches onto the back pocket, and I start to grab a rake to try and sway her off my co-worker. All the while, my co-worker is starting to freak out a bit, slightly trying to get away with this condor attached to her back pocket. The condor does let go soon afterwards, and we laugh it off once the adrenaline wears off a bit. I'm not a fan of the reptiles or cockroaches that I had to feed, and the small mammals weren't my favorite, but I like the ferrets, and the 15 goats we had pooped a lot. I used to work at a safari park in Scotland. Generally, most animals were sound. I quite enjoyed this one little feared beast called an Anoa. They are basically big dog-sized cows and live in pairs. This one had a bad reputation because it was seen as mean. However, the poor thing never did anything bad to me, and I liked spending time with it. I even snuck it in a few apples from time to time. It was separated from all other animals because one day it had gone under a camel and stabbed it repeatedly in the belly with his horns. So they tranquilized the Anoa and his partner to move them, but she died, and so he was alone. Poor wee dude. Worst overall was Chippy the chimp, who was a complete bellend and went out of his way to show it to everyone. He would eat the other chimp's favorite foods, even though he didn't even like them. Bit of a wee prick, our friend Chippy. Most feared animals in the park, though, were the otters. Sweetest little chirps when they're hungry, but clever, fast, and bitey as heck. I have never jumped so high as when I was in their enclosure, giving them things to play with when the food ran out to distract them. And they realized I was in there with them, and they came bolting after me. Must have cleared 6 feet. I did a 6-month work experience in a small zoo in the UK. The best animal to look after was a big tegu called Reggie. Watching him eat dead rats was morbidly fascinating. The worst animal to feed were the Humboldt penguins. The greedy little sods would bite my shins every frickin' day. I'd come home with a ring of purple bruises just below my knee. If you do happen to love penguins and are near Edinburgh Zoo, anytime you can see, take a march around the park at lunchtime. I think one of them is a member of the Norwegian army for some reason. He has a little medal for his flipper. It's adorable. Damn, this was 7 years ago, so I can't really confidently say whether or not that's still there, because I'm like, yeah, I'll go to Edinburgh Zoo to see a little medal on a penguin. That sounds cool. I worked at a large pet store that had many exotic pets and was kind of like going to the zoo, minus the lions, tigers, bears, etc. I worked in the reptile room and definitely had my favorites. Pretty much all of the lizards, except lecker geckos, were chill. The little snakes we had were rude. It was a gamble of if you were going to get bit whenever you had to stick your hand in there. It didn't hurt, but was annoying. The gopher snakes and tree boa you also had to watch carefully. On the other hand, the pythons and sand boas were docile. A large caiman iguana bit half of my thumbnail off, which was really disappointing because I was the only one that would go in her room and spend time with her. Sometimes the things we love hurt us the most. Honestly, I love working with all of them. Sloths are definitely one of my favorites as far as hands-on goes. I love working with big cats and grizzly bears because they have a lot of character. Big cats are seriously just house cats, but bigger. Penguins are fun to work with, but they are the worst to clean up after. They eat fish all day, which makes their poop acidic and smelly. It gets everywhere and destroys the paint on the floor. A donkey once bit my fish at a mall petting zoo. I still like donkeys, though. They're cool. True words were never said. Obligatory, not a zookeeper, but my answer for both are horses. I was a ranch hand for 2 years in college and discovered you could tell a horse's personality and intelligence by how they kept their stall. Dirty and disgusting stall typically means the horse is a butthole and doesn't respond well to direction. We also housed other horses, and if you're wondering, ponies all have a Napoleonic complex and are douchebags. Also, I can never eat A1 steak sauce again because of that job. TLDR, don't be a ranch hand, kids. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Linked in the description below.